Home away from home, if you will, for me at least, and I think for many in this city, the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and that is where we are today as practice gets underway coming up in just about an hour or so for a return to the oval for stock cars with the Brickyard 400, of course, running on Sunday. Today at 1:05, it is the practice for the Pennzoil 250. That's the Xfinity cars that are going to be on the oval. And then at 2:35 today, so the last half hour or so that we are on the air, the Brickyard 400 practice does get underway, presented by the way, PPG. Jake Quarry along with Jimmy Cook. Kurt Darling is here hanging out as well. Eddie Garrison back in studio on this. Jimmy, what is a spectacular Friday that mirrors the weather conditions that we had yesterday for a lot of fun out at the back nine, and certainly a thank you to everybody that showed up.
Everybody that was involved with the fan on the back nine golf outing from Franciscan Health, where proceeds went to the Franciscan Health Foundation, to all of our fans and listenership across the fan being out there, to Jack Daniels, to all of the sponsors that help supply one-of-a-kind auction items, experiences, and memorabilia. The turnout was great. Jake, the weather was as perfect as you could have asked for. I believe you highlighted it like you do when the weather is that great. It was a little slice of San Diego in Indianapolis summertime. It was absolutely spectacular. We were up on the third floor where, again, if you ever get a chance, you weren't there yesterday, even if you were and you want to make a return trip, the Back Nine Golf and Entertainment Center, the look of the skyline on the third floor of Back Nine is as nice of a view of the city as you're going to find around central Indiana. The staff was great. It was so great to see our listeners, see fellow members of the fan, and be out there to support a good cause like Franciscan Health Foundation. So special thank you to everybody, Jack Daniels, the fan of the Back Nine, and Franciscan Health. We had a blast. Now, we didn't get to see you as much yesterday because, as we joked about, while you were one of the MCs of the event, that type of cross that you bear includes, signing autographs, shaking hands, kissing babies, meeting the people. How was your day at the fan on the back nine?
It was good. I had a lot of fun. It was good to see everybody out there. Steve and Brenda and Matthew were swinging it around. Owen Poley was out there, which was fun. I'll tell you what, Harley, who won the longest drive competition, it looked like John Daly out there. Dylan, it was good to see Dylan yesterday. So all kinds of listeners. Derek White was out there.
I finally met Kansas City Steve, Jake.
Yeah, that's what I meant, Steve and Brenda.
Let's go.
Steve's the best, right? He was decked out. And the best thing about it is in the silent auction, Steve's the one that won the Colts helmet, which was beautiful.
He left, and he was so guilty about it. He wanted to make sure I knew that, hey, this is not for me. This is for a friend of mine. So I appreciated him letting me know that. But, hey, I don't care what you're bidding on. It could be a Broncos helmet for all I care. As long as you're supporting a good cause like Franciscan Health, all power to you.
Now, here's another fun aspect of yesterday. Bill Brooks, who I have always said, and I've probably only told Bill Brooks this 247 times. Bill Brooks was out there representing the Colts yesterday, and we were chatting. And Bill Brooks, in the move that he made on the Monday Night Football 55-23 win for the Colts on Monday Night Football against the Denver Broncos, the fake right, fake left, and then sideline touchdown run, probably, to me, it was like the epicenter of Colts geek fandom is my childhood in such a surreal moment on Monday Night Football. But it was surreal to me yesterday because Bill Brooks came up to me and said, hey, I've got an IndyCar question for you, and was asking me several questions about IndyCar, which was very cool. First, that I was shocked, flattered, whatever you want to say, that he recognized me. I mean, that was that alone. I'm like, really? But he also mentioned that when he was, living and playing for the Colts, that he lived next door to for a brief time, lived next door to Al Unser Jr. And so he kind of started following racing at that point. Said he's been to all aspects of the Indy 500, but not to the 500 itself, and that his only hesitation in going to the 500 is dealing with the crowds. I mean, I get it, right? The traffic, everything else. Should I have Bill Brooks? Should I extend the invitation for Bill Brooks to be my spotter and spin the Indy 500 with Bill Brooks?
Absolutely.
I think it'd be cool, right? Have Bill Brooks as my spot. Just go up there and turn 3 and hang out for the day and ride in together and ride out. I mean, it's a long day.
He would have to. Here's the thing. He would have to commit to the length of that day. You're used to the length of that day. It's your job. You'd be able to guide him through the path to a very high-level, enjoyable day. But it's his commitment to that amount of time. But I don't see any reason why you shouldn't extend an invitation. I think that'd be awesome.
I think it'd be cool to have. I mean, to have Bill Brooks as my spotter. Right?
I only get to see him a handful of times a year, but I had great conversations with him, J.J. Stankovitz, a lot of people from the Colts radio network. And, I mean, I love Bill. And so the idea of getting to spend for him, you said he has not been before, correct? It would be his first ever
Correct.
500? Yeah, to be able to share that experience with him, I think it'd be awesome. I think you should.
So maybe we'll do that. We'll see. But nonetheless, here we are. Now, Jimmy, your overall thoughts on the Brickyard. Will you, because I'm curious about this. I think it's an interesting storyline of, the history of this event. And I'm going to tell the story that I've told a billion times, but I'm going to repeat it just because to me, and maybe I'm the only one that finds this fascinating, but I do find it fascinating to kind of illuminate the journey of the Brickyard 400. So in 1994 is when the Brickyard obviously came to Indianapolis with Jeff Gordon winning the first. I mean, we know this well. 1995, Dale Earnhardt winning race number 2 in a race that was rain delayed. Well, not rain delayed, but nobody thought it was rain delayed just for later in the day, but nobody thought the race was going to run, and then Dale Earnhardt won it. And, you had the birth of this new event. And there's great events and great history of the rivalries between drivers at this track. Jimmy Spencer and Kurt Busch come to mind, getting tussled with one another. Tony Stewart winning here. I mean, there were a lot of great storylines that took place. But in terms of, and I think it's difficult, understandably so, it's difficult to explain to people that were not around then how big it was. And I don't mean that as a slight towards even the Brickyard, but NASCAR in general was at its apex and in its infancy here at the Speedway. I think that this event and NASCAR coming to the Oval cemented for both a legitimacy. It legitimized the Indianapolis Motor Speedway as the cathedral of speed to a fan base in the Southeast that had only known stock cars or leaned towards stock cars. And it legitimized NASCAR racing to people in the upper Midwest that only followed or believed in open-wheel racing. And I think a lot of people thought those two marriages, the marriage of those two would never come together, but it did. And there's a whole storyline about it coming together with, Bill France coming here and meeting with Tony George and seeing the crowds that had shown up for a test with Nigel Mansell that was taking place at the same time they were initially meeting about coming and doing a NASCAR race at Indianapolis. But in 1994, when it first ran, it was huge. And it stayed huge for a long time, really until the tire debacle of Goodyear, where they had to come in and do a cautionary, a caution flag every 20 laps to test the tires and et cetera. That was in the mid-2000s. But nonetheless, in 1998, I was working, and I tell this story a million times only to illuminate the stature of this race. In 1998, I was working at WRTV. The sports department at that time was Ed Sorensen was the sports director. I believe Scott Hoke may have still been the weekend guy. If not, it was Dave First. I believe it was Scott Hoke or Rob Powers maybe. And then Dave First was the reporter. Jay Bausbeck was the full-time producer. John Dirth was helping out still as a producer. And then I was the hourly wage paid intern, if you will. Okay? I mean, I was I was the absolute doing anything I could to cut my teeth. I was 25 years old. And I was so excited to be able to cover the Brickyard 400. I had written for it for the Indianapolis Recorder in 1997. I was working at the cigar store, and a guy named Jim Nelson of the Recorder asked if I wanted to cover the Brickyard, and that meant life to me because this event was so massive. And in 98, I couldn't believe that I was going to be a credentialed media member for WRTV as part of the long coverage beginning at 5 in the morning, like every other TV station. Breakfast at the Brickyard, 5 in the morning coverage, live, all the way through. And on probably Wednesday of that week, they came to me and said, by the way, we're now polling you. You're not going to be part of the Brickyard coverage. It absolutely defeated me and deflated me. And they said, instead, you and Dennis Goins are going to go to Champaign, Illinois, because the Colts have a scrimmage against the St. Louis Rams. And so as the number 8 guy in a 7-person sports department, I had to go with the measly, meandering, low-rung, bottom-of-the-totem pole assignment of covering a Colts scrimmage against the St. Louis Rams. And I went over there, and Mike Chappell was there, of course. And I honestly believe that we are the only two Indianapolis media members that were there to interview Peyton Manning after Peyton Manning's first ever opportunity of seeing another NFL defense. So Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts went in total obscurity in Champaign, Illinois against the Rams because every single media member of Indianapolis that had any weight or clout whatsoever was covering the 1998 Brickyard 400. And it absolutely trumped anything else that could take place in Indianapolis sports, including Peyton Manning and the Indianapolis Colts. That's how big it was. And then a combination of factors went into play where it fell out of favor a little bit, I think, to the fan base. I mean, none of this is any secret. The tire issues that took place with Goodyear, where they just missed on the balance and it was threading the tires, and they had to come in for every 20 laps, like I just mentioned. That, and then in addition to that, I think people just figured out that the cars were too wide to basically go 2 to 3 wide in the corners here, like people had become so accustomed to. So once the novelty of all of it wore off,
sure,
the interest level waned. They went to the road course. It was fabulous. I really enjoyed the races on the road course for the last 3 years and calling them. And now the return back to the oval. And it's interesting how it was a master play because now people were again pining to see the cars on the oval. I'm very curious, Jimmy, with all of that, I'm very curious to see what exactly happens in terms of the crowd and the overall buzz this year.
Yeah, I'm curious what level of support and hype there is, just as much as you are, Jake. I mean, it goes without saying, and our listeners know this. Certainly you know this. I know this. This isn't the same level of buzz and hype and adrenaline that you get, at least today's Brickyard, as you do the greatest spectacle in racing and the build-up to the Indianapolis 500. And everything's about it different. It's a different circuit in general. It's NASCAR versus IndyCar. There's so many different elements to it than what you're getting in the lead-up to the month of May. That said, in terms of motorsports in the world, NASCAR is still right up there, and to have this foundational partnership, as you mentioned, legacies being cemented for both Indianapolis Motor Speedway and NASCAR 30 years ago when this partnership arrives, to still have it be a must-see event on the calendar, to see be it such a big landmark opportunity for both NASCAR and one of the greatest venues in all of American, make that all global sports in the Speedway, is awesome. Now, that said, I am curious to see what level of reception, what level of attendance, and what level of showcase that we wind up getting from this, because it's one of those, there's a lot of things working for the Brickyard. You mentioned the return to the Oval, and that's something that people have been hyped about and seeing it there, but it's also a anniversary year, right? It's the 30th anniversary of the event, and in general, you're going to get, you would hope, more eyeballs, more people wanting to be there because it is a anniversary event and it has special occasion to it. Is the Brickyard able to rise to that? I think it will, but it's a different vibe than it was for obvious reasons in the lead up to the month of May.
In terms of the weekend itself, I mean, it's going to be a great weekend, Jimmy. Obviously, I've talked about the fact that between our radio stations, you had the Brickyard 400 and the IndyCar race in Toronto. Toronto is what I'll be broadcasting. Your weekend plans, anything special?
Yeah, so I've been listening to those ads that are on the station. Just kidding, but they are ads on our station. I'm going to be at Hinkle Fieldhouse tonight, taking in some of the TBT, the basketball tournament. That's going on all day today, but that's that $1 million prize tournament of alumni-led groups from former college teams, and for the first time ever, both Butler and Indiana have teams in the field. Purdue has a team in the field as well. I believe they're playing during the show today over at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Purdue is. But then you have Indiana and you have Butler being represented for the first time in those games taking place at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Anytime I have an excuse to go to historic Hinkle Fieldhouse, I'm always down for it. I'm hopeful that it's going to be, fun, high-level basketball for alumni players of yesteryear. And then selfishly this weekend, a little shout-out to my nephew Brody. It's his birthday party this weekend, so that's the
how old's
agenda.
Brody?
Brody's 5.
Nice. You could actually take Brody one of the box lunches that's being provided here, except for that Kurt Darling's now on his third one, which is impressive. Some traditions never go away. You sit here, you do live radio, and Kurt now is on his third, which is impressive. Kurt, what have you had there? You had the veggie. Did you also have the ham and cheese? This is all from McAllister's. What else did we have here?
I think I had two clubs and a Caesar wrap, along with the chips and the brownie to go with.
Do you eat at home? Do you eat at home, or do you just?
Oh, I do eat at home. Yes.
You just wait until you come to the.
But I also
Speedway.
take advantage of the fact that this is a very good and free catering.
It is.
So
Listen, I got no problem with it. The only problem is they brought one for each of us here, and now Jimmy and I are starving. That's cool, though.
To be fair, though, I did ask Jimmy if he wanted one beforehand.
He did offer
said
me
no.
one. It was very kind.
No worries. I get it. No worries whatsoever.
Technically, it was just half a sandwich, but it was still kind of curt to
Jimmy, I love the
one.
fact that John's made a lot of this, JMV has, in the afternoons, and he's right. I do love the fact that now in the vacancy of sports programming that takes place in the summertime, basketball has taken advantage of that. Between the fact that you have obviously the team getting, Team USA getting ready for the Olympics, the WNBA has become a conversation, understandably so here with Caitlin Clark and the Fever, and now this tournament as well, where you have right here at Hinkle Fieldhouse. But I think it's great. Not only the options from a viewing standpoint, but just to kind of keep different sports in play here in what normally is the time of year where sports kind of takes itself off.
Yeah, and it's especially passionate here in Indiana, right? I mean, we love our basketball. Anytime you're able to have crossroads of the Olympics and getting to see Team USA, both on the men's and the women's side, in general, this is a calendar year because of the cycle that it is, where you're going to have high-level sporting events. You're going to have the Olympics. If you were as passionate as I was about it, you're going to have Euros that just finished up, Copa America that just finished up on the soccer side, and then you have, as you mentioned, the Fever taking center stage. Baseball fans are still getting their fix, and the basketball tournament, which has been a long-running event, but finally getting more representation here in the Midwest with IU's alumni team, Assembly Ball, and All Good Dogs, the Butler team, being represented along there with Men of Mackey. It's really special to see so many different avenues finding proper lanes in the summer to bring us these sporting events. Ordinarily in a normal year, you would still have the basketball tournament. You would still have, in theory, as long as Caitlin Clark keeps being Caitlin Clark and Aaliyah Boston keeps being Aaliyah Boston, you'll have the Fever now. But this was a dry spell at times where if you're not a baseball fan, you're just kind of figuring out what sports is going to mean to you during the summertime. And this year especially, John's right, and you're exactly right, too. There has been new lanes, new pathways. It's part of the blessing of, we talk about it, is it a blessing or a curse of having so many things on streaming or so many things on different platforms now, where it used to be just, 100, 200, 300 channels, and smaller than that, 4, 5, 6 channels of being able to consume everything. In this society of sports, especially during the summertime, there is now lanes carved out for everybody, Jake, where it doesn't matter if you want baseball, basketball, soccer, racing, you're going to be able to find something during the summer months. And a tip of the cap to all those that have capitalized and put out these great products.
Yesterday, by the way, I sent you a screen grab of the leaderboard at the Open, right?
You did.
And if you looked at that screen grab of like I'm looking at it right now, I'm pulling up the leaderboard here, okay? And I have before me the list and you got to scroll, like right at the top of the list that I have. Right at the top.
Mm-hmm.
Struggling a little bit today, admittedly, but hanging on with just a 12 over. Santiago de la Fuente, who's waiting to make his move. Now, Santiago, listen, go back and look at, if you watch, the greatest racehorse of all time is Secretariat, right?
Yes.
If you watch Secretariat, in particular in the Preakness, Secretariat starts last, right? The announcer even says, Secretariat into turn 1 starting last once again, just like in the Kentucky Derby. You watch the Belmont. Secretariat and Sham coming out of 2, side by side. Sham maybe a nose ahead.
Sure.
Secretariat was sitting there and thought, you know what? I'll wait till it's go time.
Yeah.
And then Ronnie Turcotte says, all right, let's go. And Secretariat says, all right, let's go. There's no turning back. And boom, gone,
sure.
Right?
Yeah, time to go.
Santiago de la Fuente is just waiting the text from Ronnie Turcotte. Let's go. And as soon as he gets it, it's go time. Now, right now, he's hanging around. Cameron Smith is his Sham. They're side by side. Stuart Clark just in front of him, a stroke in front of him. That's fine. It's fine. But what he's really doing, Santiago de la Fuente, in the Open, is he's looking around because he's like, and this is what is hurting him. Santiago de la Fuente, who is my guy, and I mean, I'm in the fan club.
Yeah.
The merchandise.
Founding charter member, I think.
That's
Founding
right. I have
member.
a trademark.
Yeah.
Santiago de la Fuente, and this is smart of him. This is a guy that grew up And, in Mexico, he's an amateur. He's getting into these tournaments now. And he was talking to his coach, and his coach said, look, here's what you need to do. And Sham had the same instructions in the Belmont.
Yep.
Stay near Secretariat.
Yep.
So Santiago de la Fuente just assumed I need to stay near Tiger Woods. Let me just hang around Tiger Woods. And Tiger Woods, Santiago got tired of waiting. I mean, he's like, yeah, it's cool that I'm hanging around with Tiger Woods, and this was my game plan, but you got to go now. You can't sit around and wait for some self-inflicted, has-been, can barely walk guy that like feels sorry, sympathy for me because of everything I've overcome, but yet you can't list a single thing that Tiger Woods has overcome that Tiger Woods didn't himself create. Tiger Woods right now, 14 over. Give it up. Give it up. Now, people will talk about, oh, it's so exciting. Is Tiger going to make the cut? That's the storyline you got to go with. That's a problem for golf, right? Golf's problem is that their biggest storyline is whether or not a has-been is one or not.
Yes.
That's a problem.
I will just acknowledge and tip the cap to Santiago de la Fuente being better than Tiger Woods this event. It could be a building block moment for him that it changes the course of his career. I will also note that in that same vein, that Tiger Woods is 21 strokes off the lead. Santiago de la Fuente, a small 19 strokes behind. But still,
like
it's mini building blocks.
Shane Lowry is your leader, by the way.
Yeah, -7.
Right now at 7 under. Daniel Brown, second. Justin Rose there. But Lowry right now at least 2 strokes up on the rest of the field. But I'm telling you, Santiago, don't rule it out, right?
Do you think that there was a passing of the torch moment today? Do you think there was a handshake and Tiger said, hey, Santiago, we've had all we can with these lessons.
There was,
your turn to
quite
fly.
frankly, there was going to be, but Santiago got tired of waiting around because he got done. He's like, look, I'm sitting here waiting it's like the guys that play with me. I feel bad because some of them are really good golfers, and I know that I'm slowing them up from hole to hole. That's Tiger, right? I mean, I got that in common with Tiger Woods at least.
You do.
So there's that.
Your boy Santiago, if the Google leaderboard is correct, still has 6 holes left to play. So there's still time to even ramp up even further.
I mean, a couple of birdies, right back in business, right?
Exactly.
Now, this is also symbolically the end of an interesting week for us, Jimmy, because this is the final week of the summer that we are doing a show without the Colts on the football field. Because by this time next week, right?
Yes.
Camp is underway.
It's pretty crazy how the NFL is able to do this, where they live by and die by this 24/7 sports cycle of NFL is king, NFL is king, NFL is king. And then just when you think you're safe and you blink twice in the summer and you're like, okay, we're in the off season. We're enjoying it. We're getting ourselves set. You blink twice and camp has arrived. And we're inside of a week now to Colts camp, and the conversations then fully shift back to what this year means for Shane Steichen in year 2 as he continues to advance and show off his moxie as a play caller, which we've seen flashes of throughout his rookie head coaching campaign and what he was able to do as an OC in other spots, including Philadelphia and the Chargers. You're seeing on display a bit as a head coach last year. But the bigger question of it all, and it's going to continue to be the question all season, is Anthony Richardson, and not just the health aspect of it. The idea, Jake, that something I think is going to happen, fair or not, and this was part of the conversation that I had with J.J. Stankovitz and Bill Brooks yesterday at the Fan on the Back Nine. What I think is going to happen from Colts fans, unless they remind themselves of this key fact, Anthony Richardson is entering year 2. That is true, but it is a de facto rookie season as a guy that only took 170, 180 snaps, whatever it was last year. He's going to still make mistakes this season. And I don't mean just, mistakes that great quarterbacks make. I mean there's going to be boneheaded mistakes, misreads, interceptions, maybe some fumbles. There are going to be hiccups and mishaps along this road. The bigger objective for Anthony Richardson is with that flow chart you have of game by game for him, it's likely to be a roller coaster where you have 1 week where maybe you're throwing 3 touchdowns and passing for 300 yards, such. The next week you throw 2 picks and you only throw for 200 yards, and it's a struggle for the Colts offensively. What you want to have happen, though, even if it's an up and down type of roller coaster, you want it to still be trending up, kind of like the stock market. You want, by the time you get to week 17, you would like for even if he's up and down, you just want it to be a slow climb, a slow ascension for him. That would be a perfectly healthy year for him as long as he's allowed to do that, to make those mistakes. And I'm worried that if Colts fans enter with unreasonable expectations for him, to not let him make those mistakes and grow, it's not going to be a healthy season.
Here's the one thing that I think is advantage Anthony Richardson. And that is, if you look, can you name for me, Jimmy, and I'm saying this not rhetorically, I'm legitimately asking because you would know this above above me, I should say. No, above I, actually. But can you name for me the primary receivers he had at Florida?
No, I cannot. No.
Ricky Pearsall.
Florida is.
There you go. Eddie Garrison got you on one.
Who's that, Eddie?
Ricky Pearsall. He's now with the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay. And he is what kind of a receiver?
He's an outside receiver. They used him all over the field, really. He got drafted in, I believe, late first round this past draft.
The reason that I'm asking is because if you look at Trevor Lawrence, if you look at Joe Burrow, if you look at, Josh Allen's the outlier here. Patrick Mahomes probably even falls into the category I'm about to speak of. And that is, if you have quarterbacks that are coming out of pass-happy college offenses that are designed to have receivers and weapons all over the field that are usually either based on their breakaway speed or their off-the-line footwork that are open all the time. And the window then at the collegiate level, Trevor Lawrence is throwing in college to a healthy Justin Ross, to T. Higgins, to, Deshaun Watson in college is throwing to, Mike Williams and again, also T. Higgins. I mean, guys that are wide open. You don't have to learn in college windows. Then you get to the NFL, and you assume that your receivers are always that open, so you're throwing with that kind of a window in mind, and you don't realize the collapse speed of an NFL defender. The advantage, I think, for Anthony Richardson is, for the most part, he was not throwing to guys that were that wide open, and he was having to throw them open at the college level, and the gap that he was throwing to in college was more similar to what he is seeing at the NBA level than the gap that Joe Burrow or Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields were throwing at in college, because those guys were always open, and they had to adjust timing. I don't know that Richardson has to adjust timing, but the other thing that we just kind of frankly don't know is in terms of touch and in terms of overall feel of whether or not he knows when to rein that in, when to pull it out, when to take advantage of that lack of a necessary learning curve, simply because we have not seen the overall body of work through 1 year that we have seen from other quarterbacks. But there are a lot of questions around the NFL of what teams, as we get set now for everybody to start reporting within, 10 days from now, everybody will have reported. They're staggering in terms of when teams are reporting. But coming up on the show today, we'll go to a 2-minute drill. We'll talk to a couple of those writers that are covering teams within the area. Also, John Orovitz going to join us halfway through the 1 o'clock hour, longtime motorsports writer, about what's taking place this weekend. Kevin Bowen as well. You will probably hear cars in just about 30 minutes or so, as the Xfinity cars will be out on the track. But when we return, the NFL, big question marks heading into the season, including some that maybe we did not think were going to be the case when we watched Kansas City win the Super Bowl just a couple of months ago. That conversation next from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. You're listening to Query & Company on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan. every time I hear this song, I'm reminded of the music video for it, where this is probably a generational thing, just showing my age, but I don't know that any frontman was cooler in any music video for any band all time than David Lee Roth in the Van Halen Jump video, for what that's worth. My name is Jay Quarry, Jimmy Cook, the other voice you will hear on this program. Occasionally when you hear ruffling of potato chips, that's Kurt Darling, who is here for our sister station, WIBC. We are in the media center here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Practice getting underway for the Brickyard 400 later today. The Xfinity cars will be out on the track just about 30 minutes from right now. But the NFL season is about to get underway in terms of training camp. Now, two things that are different than years past. Number one, seems to me, Jimmy, that teams are reporting earlier than normal. That may or may not be accurate. My mind might be a little off on that. But we do see more teams now that do their camp. The days are kind of long gone of the Junction Boys, teams going out in the middle of some outpost in 105-degree heat and being there for 7 weeks and living in dorms and that kind of thing. More often than not, they are at team facilities or a facsimile thereof and are a little bit lighter in terms of the workload. But, the Bengals, I think, report it may be actually on Monday or Tuesday. The Bears, I think, report this weekend. I might have those two reversed. And then, obviously, the Colts coming up here within the week. In terms of the rest of the league, one of the things to me, Jimmy, that's always intriguing is every year in the NFL, there is a team that by week 9 or 10, you're looking at the standings saying, are they good? I didn't think they would be, but are they actually good? And then there's another team that at the beginning of the year, everybody thinks is going to be good, and just nothing goes their way. The Colts have been victim and also, on the other side, recipient of both of these awards. If you look at Andrew Luck's rookie year, the Chuck Pagano, Bruce Arians year, and everything bounced the Colts' way. Seemingly each quarterback they had to go up against each week, they were seeing a backup. Every ball that bounced in any way on a turnover fell into the lap of a defender. I mean, everything went the Colts' direction, and all of a sudden I think people were saying, wait, are these guys good? Like this Andrew Luck leading this game-winning drive in Detroit, these guys are legit, right? And then there are other years where we had great expectation for them. The Andre Johnson, Frank Gore acquisition year, for example. Griggs is back in the Brinks truck, wheeling and dealing, and then it just fell flat.
Yep.
This year, your anticipation, give me the team first off that everyone's high on that you would say do not buy because they're going to disappoint.
I would say that at this juncture, there's two teams it could be, but for the sake of the exercise, I'll do one. It's the Miami Dolphins. I think a lot of people, once again, are high on them taking that step forward. They could have made a deep run in the playoffs last year, if not for a couple of mixed executed plays and them kind of wiltering in that cold weather of Kansas City in the initial rounds of the playoffs. They still have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill. There's going to be that conversation of if it's another step forward or if Tua Tagovailoa is just who he is at this point. I really like Mike McDaniel as a coach. Like I enjoy what he's trying to build there in Miami, but I feel like they are going to be yet again another in vogue dark horse pick, if you will, to make a deep run. And I would caution to stay away from it because the playoff race, if you're not winning your division, and I don't think Miami will this year, I think Buffalo is once again going to rule the AFC East. So now you're looking at a wild card spot, and teams are going to be competing with those wild card spots for are teams like the Colts, who I think are going to be a playoff team this year, like the Jaguars, who you would expect to be a playoff team this year. And the other card in that deck is the Houston Texans. One of those three has to win the division. It's not going to be the Titans. I will ride that train into the ground until Will Levis proves me wrong. So one of the Texans, one of the Jaguars, one of the Colts wins the South. The other two are vying for playoff spots, and that's not even looking at other teams that are hoping to take leaps forward this season in the playoff race. I'm not saying they will, but there's a lot of momentum being rid from Las Vegas after what they were able to do to close the year last season with the Raiders, and maybe them making up some ground and being a playoff team next year. Miami's going to be the sexy pick because of the market they're in and because of the high-profile receivers that they do have. Ultimately, though, if I was to give one to stay away, it would be Miami. I guess same exercise for you. Is there a team that everybody's trending towards that you feel like, well, I mean, this is a weird league. I don't know that they're going to be the team everybody thinks they will be.
Okay, first off, I think that if you look historically, this franchise that everybody's going to mention, and I think now and I do think he's going to make a difference. I don't think it's going to be in year one, and I love Justin Herbert. But the Chargers are literally working like 4 years in a row now of everybody's sexy pick, right?
Wait, hold on, wait. This just in. National pundits have picked them to win the AFC West for the 10th year. Okay, all right,
every year, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, that strikes a chord with you.
It does.
I didn't mean to hit a soft spot, a sensitive spot.
It's
there.
okay. You're fine.
But the Chargers are one, but they disappoint, so that's kind of going with the obvious.
Yep.
I think Cleveland can take a step back.
Yeah.
They are great defensively, but last year, the Flacco magic, which certainly if Anthony Richardson goes down here, you would like to see that kind of, the way that he was able to play. He was in his zone for certain when he got there, but
that Watson trade is in danger of being one of the worst trades of modern NFL
It may
history.
already be, Jimmy. Deshaun Watson making that trade for him when you knew the baggage that was there, and I will say this, that continues to befuddle me because when Watson was in college, he was absolutely like a saint. I mean, we don't know these guys. I get it. Sure. I mean, I totally understand that. But by all account, every aspect, every single thing you heard about the guy was that he was as squeaky clean as squeaky clean can be. Maybe that's a problem. Maybe he got to the NFL, and then all of a sudden it was Katie bar the door because he got that first feel of success and stardom, even though he had it, obviously, in college. He was a major superstar. But nonetheless, being away from the game as long as Deshaun Watson was, there was certainly last year, I don't know that you ever saw glimpses of, okay, he's returning to the form that made Cleveland go out and give him. And it's the fact that it's the guaranteed contract. That alone is going to make it almost impossible, barring a Super Bowl run, for them to justify making that deal. But Cleveland is a team that I think if you look at their record last year, their defense is so good that it's going to keep them in games. But I could see them absolutely taking a step backward. Another one that I think people will look at based on the way the year ended for them, and it's going to go one of two ways here this year, but now that there's tape out there and people are more familiar with it and everything else, I thought Green Bay played really well at the end of last year.
It did,
But I don't know that carries over to this year because I think it's going to go one of two ways. Green Bay's either going to be one of those teams that runs away with their division, or I think they're going to look at it and you're going to say, okay, they caught lightning in a bottle there for the last quarter of last season, but it did not carry over for them this year.
So much of it goes back to the quarterback, and Jordan Love was a key turning point for them of kind of discovering what it means. Correct. And it's in a division that is topsy-turvy to say the least. You would think that Minnesota winds up inherently taking a step backward without Kirk Cousins, which is a wild sentence to say because I've always thought Kirk Cousins was a you-know-what-you're-getting type of quarterback, but now he's off the board for them. The Lions, when's the last time, and Jake, I have to go to you here as the more, having consumed more football than myself, when's the last time you remember going into a season with as much confidence and high vibes to not only be a playoff team, but to win the NFC North with the Detroit Lions? Like, when does this happen?
And by the way, we're going to talk to Detroit in our 2-minute drill coming up, I think, in the 1 o'clock hour. But I think you have to go back to either obviously coming off of the NFC Championship game in the 91 season with Barry Sanders, and then following that up. But you always had inconsistent quarterback play, Jimmy, with Detroit. You never knew who it was that was, who was going to be. Is Scott Mitchell going to be good for them? A million different quarterbacks that they ran through there. Joey Harrington, is he going to be a good quarterback? Charlie Batch. But I think you'd have to also then, since that era, go to when they had the run where 3 years in a row they took elite level, I think it was 3 years in a row, elite level receivers that you thought were finally going to open up and they were going to be this unbelievable offense, and it just never came together for them. The question now is they're not going to sneak up on anybody. I mean, and Dan Campbell, as much as I love him, and I think most people respect just his fiery nature because we kind of made fun of it when he took the job and, we're going to bite kneecaps and whatever else it was that he said, and people thought it was a little bit zany. But clearly players bought into it. But the question now is, does that buy-in wear itself out? Because we've seen it here in Indianapolis. Ron Meyer and Larry Brown on the Pacer side of things. There are coaches that are great buy-in, turnaround coaches, but it starts to fall deaf after a number of years. And I don't think that Dan Campbell's there at all, but he could be. And if that arrives, then does Detroit take a step back? Now, the other side of it, which we'll get to on the other side, is this, and that is, who is the team that you look at and you say, they're poised and watch? Because I've got one that I think could win 12 or 13 games and nobody's talking about. And it's not in the AFC. That's the good news for the Colts. But we'll get to that. And again, practice getting underway about 20 minutes from now here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway of Query & Company. Okay, teams in the NFL in the upcoming season that have the potential to have that breakthrough year. Somebody's going to do it, right? Jimmy, you agree with that, correct?
Yes. Yeah, it happens every year. Lions were the team of that destiny a year ago. It always happens. So you can make the argument the Texans were that team as well. They weren't expected to do anything other than have a rookie quarterback struggling. They wind up winning the South.
I think Texans for sure. By the way, Dallas is one that I could see backpedaling a little bit, right?
Yeah, they backpedal every year, but yes, I could see that.
Well, they won their division last year.
I know. I'm a noted Cowboys hater. I'm like everybody else. I'm tired of ESPN throwing them at me 24/7. They haven't done anything in my lifetime. Let's keep it moving.
I did see a meteorologist the other day that somebody sent out, and it was pretty good.
I saw this
the weather
clip, too.
forecast
Yep,
somewhere, and he's like, "Yeah, you take a look at the week here. It's basically like the Dallas Cowboys. Everything's stuck in the 90s."
I did see that.
I thought it was pretty strong. Your answer is this, and I hedged it a little bit. I fudged it a little bit.
Okay.
I don't know what team it is that's going to be a breakout 12 or more game winner this year, but it's going to be one of them out of the NFC South, because that has been a vat of suck, that whole division for a couple of years now. And there's no division that seems to rotate through more than the NFC South. Like, no one team takes a multi-year dynasty, if you will, through it. Now, I would say Carolina we can write off, right? Carolina's not ready to be there yet.
Yeah, you're still so many question marks with Bryce Young and what's happening with the
Schoolhouse Rock. That's dysfunction junction, right? What's your function? I mean, we have no idea.
Yeah. No,
now,
I'd say Panthers are distant fourth.
Tampa, to me, and I know Tampa last year was a playoff team. I'm going to go with Tampa on it, because Tampa at least has some stability to it. You know, everybody else seems to kind of be going year by year of figuring out quarterbacks. I mean, Atlanta, for example, making moves at the quarterback position, but I don't know that Atlanta's ready either. Tampa's the one team. I'll say Tampa finally says, you know what, we're tired of screwing around with this, and takes a step forward. So I'll say Tampa is the team that wins 12 or 13 games. But it's going to be. But I have a feeling it's going to be in the NFC South. We're not going to have that regular vat of suck, and somebody's going to separate themselves.
I am curious with the Falcons.
I was standing up, and then I realized that means on YouTube that everybody was just staring at my midsection. Which, listen, good for viewership.
Exactly. The ratings are soaring now.
That's right.
Look, they draft Michael Penix Jr. to the Falcons. I think this will be a sit-behind year and learn year for Penix. The Kirk Cousins move is interesting because, as I said last segment, there's a clear cap on what he can do and how far he can take you, but he is kind of that Alex Smith reset quarterback where you know what you're getting. You're getting stability at that position. And the Falcons have been so bad and so inconsistent the last 5 seasons. There are question marks around that offense, like Drake London, like Kyle Pitts, of what exactly are you getting outside of Bijan Robinson?
Is there any better name than Drake London?
It's as good as they get, Jake. But you get to answer that question.
My roommate Drake London, we're actually going to a wine tasting and reading later tonight. Drake London absolutely drinks chai tea.
He's a big chai tea
Eddie Garrison's alter ego is Drake London when he goes and gets his chai tea.
Totally.
He goes to Starbucks and like, what's your name again? Oh, Drake London, yes.
I don't know if the Falcons will be in that same ascension territory that the Buccaneers could, but they're going to have a lot of answers for weapons they have around Kirk Cousins.
Does that sound like a hotel?
Drake London does.
I stayed at the
does.
London Drake, yes. It has a fabulous morning coffee.
Well, there's a Drake Hotel in Chicago,
of
isn't
course.
there? So
yeah.
you could have the Drake Hotel in London, right? You could make that a spin-off. I just think that there's so many every year, and I get this a little bit more, Jake, because I play fantasy
football. Now,
football.
if it's the Drake in London, Ontario, it's across from a strip club, just so you know. The Drake London there, which is actually probably to a lot of people more popular than the actual London Drake.
If you were a Falcons fan and for years you've been hearing about these offensive weapons, you would hope this year with a stable quarterback, you're finally getting answers, would you not? Like, I think that's what you're hoping for out of Kirk Cousins. You figure out, hey, is this just a team with one good running back?
But that's the same as Minnesota, right?
Yes, but they wound up being a playoff team and being in a conversation with him. I'm not saying they're going to ascend to new heights, but the Falcons need answers for what their direction is moving forward. They have a lot of good playmakers. The quarterback position has been a mess for the last 3 or 4 years. Maybe Kirk Cousins stabilizes that, and if the Buccaneers don't take the leap forward, why not the Falcons to win the NFC South? Somebody's got to do it.
When we come back, what the hell happened earlier today where all of a sudden everybody was stranded? I'll let you know what I'm talking about. And we're going to do a 2-minute drill before we get to John Oriovitz, better known as Oreo. which is coming up at the bottom of the hour. From the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, it's Query and Company on the Fan. Look at Eddie Garrison. Yes, Drake London coming through, spinning the hits back in the studio for us. Eddie Garrison, the of course, CEO of the company, coming up with a little Schoolhouse Rock for us. My name is Jake Query, Jimmy Cook here as well. We are at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Devin Duncan is our on-site engineer, and I'm not saying that strange things are afoot here at IMS. Connor Daly just got into his nationwide, or Xfinity car. That practice getting underway here in just about 5 minutes. But just a second ago, and I have no idea, I don't know if it was the first, second, or third sandwich in the box lunches that Kurt Darling inhaled that caused him to hallucinate. But I noticed that he was humming to himself the theme that the guards are all singing in The Wizard of Oz as they're marching towards trying to run Dorothy and the rest of them off. Kurt, this is correct, right? Did I not overhear you doing this to yourself? I'm sitting here and you're working going, oh.
The reason why that popped into my head is because you mentioned you're going to be talking to Oreos, so I went, Oreo.
I figured you were actually waiting for Oreos to wash down after your third club sandwich.
I could use some Oreos right now, though.
I know. Well, they probably have them around here. We'll see if we can't get them delivered. We've been talking about of course, the NFL season getting underway. Let me ask you this, Jimmy, because you are a smarter guy and a younger and fresher guy when it comes to the inner workings of the interweb.
You're right on one of the three.
I still have dial-up internet back home, right? And I still use a Hotmail address.
Sure.
So what happened today? All of a sudden, all I know is I'm looking on my group text, shout out Tracksuits and Tiger Queens, and everybody's talking about, on my group text, how they're stranded at airports all over the country because I guess somebody decided to upgrade something and they forgot to pay the internet bill. Is that what happened? And it shut down like American travel?
Yeah, you had grounded flights. Your banks go offline. Media outlets off the air. One of my sister-in-law couldn't get a grocery order from Meijer in, just a mobile order to get set up because of this. But I got to be honest with you. From what I understand, at least from the AP article that I read earlier today, and I have up now, it's not thought to be a security incident or a cyber attack, just like you mentioned, perhaps an update issue or something, but not a
somebody didn't
threat
refresh?
to security.
Was that it? Somebody didn't refresh?
I think that's what it was. I think that somebody was operating on a bad OS, and they had to do an update.
So explain this to me like I'm a third grader, which I know is not hard to do.
Sure.
So you tell me if this is correct. This is my very vague understanding, and I want you to tell me if it's an understanding that is accurate, because I get confused by this stuff. So my assumption or my understanding is that several different major corporations rely on a larger corporation's computer database to run all of their things for them. Whether we're talking about air traffic control, whether we're talking about airlines, they all use a common computer supplier, if you will, to get everything out and about. But then one of them decided that they bought into one of these pop-up ads that pops up and says, your computer has been corrupted and you need to download this particular spyware or else we're going to steal everything that you've ever had. And somebody clicked on that, and then it froze everything, and planes started falling out of the sky and checks started bouncing. Is that basically what happened today?
I don't think that we had planes necessarily falling, but we had a lot of issues with communication and infrastructure networks, thanks to, as you mentioned, a faulty software update. The trouble with the update, issued by cybersecurity firm CrowdStrike, affected customers running Microsoft Windows. So once again, a friendly reminder that if you were running on Apple, probably wouldn't happen. That's just an Apple Microsoft joke. But yeah, look, it just sounds like it was a bad update that when we live in a world where, Jake, so much of it hinges on global connection and technology. It's like when you ever have that happen where you're on Wi-Fi.
What is this CrowdStrike then? What is CrowdStrike? It struck a crowd, but what is it exactly?
It sounds like it's just a cybersecurry firm.
Is this a malware thing? What's the malware?
Malware.
When I think of malware, I think of Chess King. What is it?
Malware. You're getting.
What's malware? Can you tell me what's that exactly?
I believe it's just malicious firmware, right?
I think of what Justine Bateman had on in Family Ties when I think
I'm looking at Devin, our engineer, for help here. We're getting into weeds that I don't understand.
What's going on?
Hey, look, all that matters, Jake, is that we are up and running. And the company itself is still connected with the beautiful thing of terrestrial radio. That's what really matters.
We take no days off at Query & Company. We don't get caught up in spyware. We don't get overly concerned whenever it says, like, your phone is corrupt now. We're not worried about it, right?
We're not.
Just Control-Alt-Delete, right?
Software updates can't affect
volume
us.
up, volume
Hit
down,
that escape
side
button.
button.
We're
Wait till it freezes for 2 minutes.
L1,
comes
R1,
back up.
L2, R2, triangle, square, circle, X. We're ready to go. Let's go. That's right.
What?
I'll just throw out a video game
what
sheet. I don't know. What do you want from me, man? I'm just helping.
Who brought John Gruden in here? What the hell did
Spider
you just say?
2 live banana, baby.
What was that you just said? L1?
L1, R1, L2, R2, square, triangle, circle, X. I'm sure that's a video game sheet. That's just your controls on a PlayStation controller, Jake. Come on, man.
I had Nintendo.
Well, then you're looking at
I
like
have blisters.
up, down, left, right,
Listen,
BA.
there's not a soul listening right now. I guarantee you.
Sure.
There is not a soul listening to this radio program that is back in my day, that's my age,
Sure.
that doesn't know the pains and the perils of what I'm about to mention.
Okay.
Okay? If you are between the ages of, I'll even go as young as 38. If you're between the ages of 38 and probably 55 years old, you absolutely, right now, there are 2 things that I can say to you that are as sure as American apple pie.
I knew you were going to
One of them is that if I mention to you late May elementary school, you automatically can hear the custodian mowing grass way off in the distance during class and still smell the big pink plastic eraser or rubber eraser and the plastic of your folders. You absolutely 110% can immediately smell and hear those things that I'm talking about.
There haven't been a ton of educational advancements, so us 30-years-olds and younger also have that
how
same
about
smell.
this?
Just for
Here's
the record,
one
but-
educational advancement.
Okay.
In addition to that,
Yep.
all of those things that I just mentioned for people between 38 and 55 are accentuated by the sound of an oscillating fan because there was no air conditioning in the classroom.
All right, checkmate.
Which
Okay,
is why
respect.
the windows were slightly cracked and you could hear the custodian mowing grass in the distance. Text me right now if I'm wrong. 317-523-9288. 317-523-9288. Also my own way to measure the ratings. 317-523-9288 if you know what I'm talking about. And if you know the following when it comes to video games. If you are of my age range, you absolutely 150% at some point suffered the most painful blister of all time on the index finger of your right hand because you were using it to oscillate back and forth on the joystick of Nintendo for track and field to be able to get the best 100-meter dash time before finally somebody introduced you to the brilliance that was using a plastic, somewhat bendable ruler that you then taped on the right-hand side and used that to tap repeatedly on the ruler to get yourself a faster speed on the 100-meter dash. I guarantee you at least one person right now is pulling over on the middle of Rockville Road, not because they just heard their 18th stop sign in the last 12 blocks, but because they are pulling over going, holy cow, I can't believe he just mentioned that, and I can actually feel that blister in my right hand right now as he speaks. Guarantee it.
You're presenting that like I'm going to fight you on that. I'm sure that's happened. I have no doubt. There's always none as true as the original Nintendo, but you're always going to hear recollection video game memories of youth. That's one that doesn't surprise me. It's like going hours on end to try to save Princess Peach from Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong, and Mario. Like I get it. I understand. I tip the cap.
I was terrible at Donkey Kong, but I didn't realize until I was an older person, that Donkey Kong, it's the same Mario fella, isn't it? Isn't
Yes.
the guy running around smashing things?
Yes, correct. That is indeed the Mario of the Mario.
I mean, was there
Brothers
one guy?
Empire.
Was there one guy that had one acid trip in Japan at some point and came up with all of these ideas and characters?
Probably. That's a fair guess.
I'm just saying. By the way, cars are out on track right now, if you can't hear it, as the Xfinity practice is underway at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Coming up just over an hour from now, it will be the Cup cars in preparation for Sunday's running of the Brickyard 400. So cars are out on track right now. It is really a gorgeous day outside. A little bit of wind coming across from, typically it comes from obviously the west, but right now the breeze a little bit from the east as cars.
I
work
realize
their
this
way
is very
turn
silly, and I'm putting myself out there on a limb here, but considering this is my first time out here to cover the Brickyard, and my prior experience in this historic, wonderful venue is with the Indy cars out on the track, if you are in that bubble like me, where this is your first time hearing in person that you can remember NASCAR engines going by, it sounds off because I'm so used to
Correct.
the Indy car. Like, I
Correct.
know that's an obvious thing to say, but it sounds off.
I mean, it's a
'Cause
normal
I'm expecting to hear
aspiration.
and
Right.
then it's
It's
like
a normal
lower.
aspiration, so you don't have the the turbo of it. I'll tell you the other thing that comes into play. I recall the first year, one of the first years that we did the Brickyard after the crowds had really dipped. And I remember Jerry Baker was in turn 1 and I was in turn 3. And those were the two areas that they did not sell a lot of tickets. And this happens to us every year as well during Carb Day when we do our fax check for the 500. You don't realize how loud the reverberation is amongst the aluminum of all the seats out here until you sit when it's relatively empty and the cars are going past. And I remember doing the Brickyard 400 one year, and there were not a lot of people. Jerry was in turn 1, and I was in turn 3. And after the race, probably at 11 o'clock that night, I got an email from Jerry Baker, and it just said, "Are your ears still ringing?" And I'm like, they are, actually, because the cars are, and I love the sound of it. And I like, to be honest with you, and I've always thought, and I'm kind of surprised, now I haven't trademarked this. I trademarked Why Not Indiana, but I have not trademarked this, although it would be, maybe I should. I don't think anybody's beaten me to this. There is an odd, for me, an odd, like, appeal to the scent at NASCAR of kind of, it's like a sweet smell of the burning oil and the rubber as the cars go past when you're way up in the stands. And I'm kind of surprised that somebody has not, like, somehow patented that as some sort of weird Axe body spray scent. I don't know what you'd call it. Trackside? I mean, you just call it trackside, but then, Kevin Lee probably owns the rights to that.
I think you are shortcutting yourself with profits. It could be an Axe body spray, but I think a nice Yankee Candle flavor would be good too.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. I was going to say if it's a spray cologne, because when you put on cologne, where do you put it on? One of two places, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm either putting it on my forearms or right
or your neck, right?
Yeah.
So neck car would be the natural, but I think that has a negative connotation for NASCAR, right?
Yes.
Does it not?
Yes.
I'm just saying. Back to our NFL conversation. The storyline that most fascinates you about the Colts, my patented question, Jimmy, not named Anthony Richardson, is what?
Does a member of the tight end room show growth to the point that you feel like you have a real long-term answer at the tight end position? I've used this example many times since Shane Steichen has been here. And I understand that at the time of this arrival of Shane Steichen 2 years ago, Dallas Goedert was still thought of as a high-level tight end. I know he's probably lower of that first tier if you want to give him that, but probably a middle-of-the-pack tight end at this point. But he was a tight end number one all the same, and the way he was utilized in Philadelphia, I think that could open up so much from a scheme standpoint for what Shane Steichen wants to execute, and inherently would make life easier on any quarterback, especially a young developing one like Anthony Richardson. I don't know who takes that leap forward this year. The most obvious candidate, assuming he could stay healthy, would be Jelani Woods. And I've made the argument as well, Jake, for Jelani Woods. Like, yes, I think he still is under contract through the 2025 season. I might be off on that, but I believe he still has 2 years left. Well, that last year's not going to matter if he underperforms this year, because then there's going to be a clear notification throughout the whole Colts front office that they need to find the tight end of the future for Anthony Richardson's growth. This is Jelani Woods' last opportunity for that. Like Anthony Richardson, my first bar for him is very low. Stay healthy, play a full season's worth of football, and see what you got, because it's an audition for him just as much as it is anybody else on this roster.
Yeah, I think that the tight end position is intriguing. Mo Alley Cox, I think, is a guy that has, at this point, you would think that we basically have seen everything that we're going to see, right? It's not like there's all of a sudden going to be a breakthrough. He's had plenty of opportunities. I like him, but he's had plenty of opportunities if he is a yard-after-catch guy. Eddie Garrison just said the guy that I think can be the receiving and stretch play tight end. But I have a question about it. Eddie, go ahead and give us the name that you just said.
I highlighted in your ear Will Mallory because of the way he closed out last season. I thought there were some flashes of that yak ability that you're talking about and the big play ability down the field.
That'd be yards after catch, right?
Yes.
When I'm still at the age that when I hear yak, I think throwing up. But yes,
that's fair.
YAC, not YAK. So, but yes, I realize it's a common acronym, the yak. But here's the thing about Will Mallory, and I tend to agree with you because he seems to me to be the one tight end in that group that is a running a slant and catching the ball kind of guy in turn up field. But I do wonder if part of that is power of suggestion. And by power of suggestion, I mean oftentimes we see players, and if they remind us of a player of yesteryear, we automatically think that means that's the kind of player they are. And just his size, I mean, admittedly, I guess a little bit the fact that he's white, but more so the size and just the overall approach feels a little bit like a Dallas Clark kind of tight end. And so therefore you think, oh, Will Mallory's a Dallas Clark type. And Dallas Clark was basically a receiver. He was a good blocker, but he was more of a receiver than anything else as the tight end. He was an additional weapon for Manning. I think for Anthony Richardson, the thing with this tight end room, Jimmy, is they need to find, and it may be Jelani Woods. It might be Kylan Granson. It may be Drew Ogletree. I don't know which one it is, but they're going to need to find, in my opinion, at least for the first half of the year, a short yardage directly off the line receiving tight end to give Anthony Richardson a comfort net to get him in rhythm, because we don't know yet where his arm is, and it's just like anything else. Like I always say, when you're going out and you're shooting baskets and just nothing's falling from the three-point line, what do your coaches tell you? Move in, get a couple of layups, and shoot a couple of free throws to get in rhythm and start to feel good about it, and then that opens things up. And I think from a quarterbacking standpoint, it's the same thing. If you're not hitting on your long throws, start hitting on your short, intermediate throws, get yourself in rhythm, and then things open up for you. And I think that's where the tight end position becomes very important.
The biggest issue that I have with that room is if all the tight ends are doing okay, none of the tight ends are doing okay. And by that, I mean you cannot have another season where it's a jack of all trades of the tight end position, master of none type of deal with this group where you don't know who the clear-cut number one tight end is. You have just situationally using Kylan Granson on one play, Will Mallory on another, Jelani Woods in a certain situation, and you're not allowing true chemistry with one sole tight end to develop. I agree with Eddie that Mallory would be an interesting candidate to say takes that leap forward. There can certainly be an argument to be made as well with Kylan Granson. But two things need to be answered for me about that room. If Jelani Woods does not seize that role, and if they go by committee with this tight end room, the answer next offseason should be go get a do-it-all tight end, whether it's in the draft or in free agency. If not, you're doing yourself a disservice offensively because we've seen this show before. You have situational tight end after situational tight end, and all it leads to is miscommunication and longing for more consistency in that position. If you don't have consistency there, Jake, it's going to doom Anthony Richardson.
Speaking, by the way, of going out and getting things, can you do me a huge favor, Jimmy, by chance?
Whatever you need, I got you.
Okay, so John Orovitz, our friend who was, longtime motorsports writer, does a lot with IMSA, but also has covered and written a lot about NASCAR. Orovitz told me that he thought he could do the show today, but unfortunately the number we're supposed to call him on, I left it, and I guess I could go do this, but I think, I don't know, it's a beautiful day out. I didn't know if you could run downstairs real quick and get Orovitz's number while real quickly I hit out a 2-minute drill.
Absolutely, glad to do that.
All right, so we got a couple of lined up for the 2-minute drill. Thank you, Eddie. Let's go ahead and take it away, a 2-minute drill football version while Jimmy tracks down John Orovitz's number.
Spanning the globe. It's the 2-minute drill.
2-minute drill begins. We go right down I-74 to Cincinnati. Charlie Clifford, WLWT in the Queen City. The Bengals are going to report here coming up. They're one of the first to report. What's the biggest storyline for Cincinnati coming into the season?
Certainly healthy Joe Burrow. He has a new look. The word around town is he's buzzed his head for training camp. That's a major deal. But it's T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. This is going to be the last year with the big duo at wide receiver. Higgins, the only wide receiver, the only player in the NFL to receive the franchise tag this offseason and not get an extension. The expectation is he will depart for more money elsewhere after this year. So can this big three make another push in the AFC? That's the number one question here this summer in Cincy.
Outside of Joe Burrow, with the Bengals reporting on Monday, their level of health is what?
Solid. They had no off-season issues throughout the spring. All starters on each side of the ball should be out there. Fingers crossed after, injury after injury for Burrow for his first 4 training camps that he'll be able to complete a summer injury-free for the first time in his NFL career.
Reds 3 games under 500, but just 8 back in the division. Second half of the season after the break now. Do they get aggressive and try to make moves, or do they let things stay and see where things fall?
They'll let things stay. Their run differential says they should be better than their record is. The pitching's good enough to make the playoffs. The question is, can they find enough consistency at the plate? Ellie De La Cruz has been the best thing to happen to this franchise in 30 years. But the bottom of the order, they had 4 key players that would have been everyday starters that essentially missed the entire first half of the season. So can this team get healthy? Can they get hot? They're far from out of it. It will all start with the hitting.
Charlie Clifford, WLWT in Cincinnati by way of Wish TV Channel 8 in Indianapolis. Always a pleasure. We'll talk to you soon.
Adios.
All right, up to Motor City, Detroit. Tim Twentyman with DetroitLions.com. Tim, let's get right to it. Lions reporting on the 27th for training camp. Biggest storyline going in is?
I think the battle at cornerback for them. I mean, it's a really remade secondary for Detroit this year. Look, they were really good last year, obviously making it all the way to the NFC Championship game, but this was a defense that was 27th against the pass, and that was a real weakness for them. And so they went and traded for Carlton Davis from Tampa Bay. They signed Amik Robertson. They re-signed Emmanuel Mosley, who only played 2 snaps last year because he tore his other ACL. He was a starter for San Francisco's defense in 2022, and then obviously drafting Terrion Arnold and Enos Rakestraw Jr. So I think the competition at cornerback, it's a much improved group, and General Manager Brad Holmes called the competition there, or the expected competition, to be a bloodbath. And so I think that's one of the big storylines. He really addressed a weakness on this football team, and now they've got talent and depth there, and it'll be really interesting to see kind of how all that plays out with playing roles and roster spots at the cornerback position and in the secondary as a whole for Detroit.
Dan Campbell pushed seemingly every correct button a year ago, and Detroit became the toast of the NFL. What is the concern about a possible letdown in the air coming out just a little bit?
Yeah, I don't think there's much. You look at the core of this team, you look at, who their studs are. I mean, they're all under 25 years old. I mean, when you get to Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, Aiden Hutchinson, I mean, they are all under 25 years old. And so the core of this football team is young. Some of the guys that really took off for them last year as rookies are only expected to be better. And then we talked about at the top the improvements they made on defense. And so, look, this is a team that thinks they're ready. They're the team that thinks they can take the next step and represent the NFC in the NFC Championship game. I think for them, they just need to stay healthy. I think, they've got all their coordinators back. The continuity is there. They've got their guys. They've got a young core. If they stay healthy, I think they're one of the teams to beat in the NFC.
8:30 in the morning, bright and early, a week from tomorrow. Lions Report. Tim Twentyman, DetroitLions.com. Appreciate it.
All right, guys.
And that is how we do the 2-minute drill. Jimmy just ran back in. Did you get a hold of Orovitz?
I was able to successfully obtain contact information.
So John Orovitz, we will pass that number along to Drake London back in studio, and John Orovitz will join us next as we are live at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's Query & Company on a Friday, and a good-looking one here on 93.5, 107.5 The Fan. Halfway through the 1 o'clock hour, for that matter, we're halfway through the show today on a Friday at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Xfinity cars out on track. It will be the Cup cars coming up here in the 2 o'clock hour, starting to practice in the return to the oval for the Brickyard 400. Joining us now on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line, he is a longtime motorsports writer who has covered virtually every aspect of racing that's taken place at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. A Speedway resident himself, John Orovitz, joins us on the program. Oreo, I will begin right out of the box with this. If you had to, and you have done so on a number of different sporting occasions about, writing about different things in motorsports, if you had to put into words how big the Brickyard 400 was in its infancy at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, how would you describe it?
Well, hi, Jake. Hi, Jimmy. Thanks for having me on. I would describe the first Brickyard 400 as mind-blowing, just in the way that the tickets sold out instantly via a lottery system. Steve Shunk, the longtime Borg Warner publicist, says he thinks that the 94 Brickyard 400 actually had the biggest crowd he's ever seen at the Speedway, which, if you look at some of the Indy 500s from the late 60s into the late 70s, that's a pretty astounding statement. But what it really did was it exposed Indianapolis as a NASCAR town. The response to it was just so overwhelming. And let's face it, Indianapolis is a racing town. It likes to vie with Charlotte, the Charlotte area, as home of the racing capital of America. And bringing the NASCAR race here really reinforced the power of Indianapolis as a racing destination. It turns out 30 years later, it's rarely been a classic car race, but as a cultural event, the first 10 years or so of the Brickyard 400 were pretty amazing.
And Oreo, with that, and I know, and I can't remember, John, and I apologize here. I think it was 2008, the year where they had the tire problems with Goodyear.
Something around there. I get
okay, I think
Michelin Formula One tire problem mixed up the years of.
Correct. I agree. I mean, they were very close to one another. I think it was 2008, but aside from that, and I don't mean this as a segment, obviously, here at the Speedway to poo-poo what happened with NASCAR, but now that it returns to the oval, we'll get to that conversation in a minute. But for those that are unfamiliar, what was the start of the decline in terms of, because I would say from 94 probably through 02, but I think people forget that even with the tire issues that took place here, it was kind of before that when people started to kind of turn away. Now, was that an IMS thing or was that an overall NASCAR thing?
No, I think that's a fair observation because the period that you're talking about, let's call it the first 5 years of the 2000s, that was a period of enormous growth for NASCAR. When Dale Earnhardt was killed in the early 2001, that literally exploded NASCAR's popularity. And NASCAR's growth between 2001 and when it peaked, which I think most people, if you look at television ratings and things like that, consider 2005, 2006, NASCAR was in a period of great growth while the Brickyard 400 was in a period of decline. And honestly, Jake, I think the reason that occurred is people looked at it and said, this is a crappy car race. These cars simply don't put on a compelling and entertaining event on this racetrack. And so I think people were kind of waking up to that fact. And then when 2008 came along, in 2008, the Goodyear problem was a bit of a farce. And that is the race that introduced the competition caution into NASCAR, something that has become widespread and happens at almost every race now, where, to protect the competitors from themselves and running radical setups that might blow tires, they force them to stop after a certain number of laps early in the race to make sure that everything's going okay in terms of tire wear and things like that. That is the legacy of the Goodyear problem at the Speedway, is the fact that NASCAR now has carte blanche to call a caution anytime it wants.
The other thing, John, that I think we overlook is that, and it kind of was the imperfect storm, I'll say it that way, but I want your thoughts on this, because I got to thinking about it once, and I thought, for all of sports, but mostly in motorsport, I think that NASCAR during its peak, it was a summer sport where people enjoyed loading up the RV and going and traveling and spending the weekend at different racetracks and camping out. And then the economy became such that gas prices skyrocketed. I'm talking like 07, 08. Gas prices skyrocketed. And at the same time, the cost of like high definition televisions decreased. So people all of a sudden figured out, wait a minute, it's a lot less expensive to just stay at home. And this television viewing experience is probably better than the cost that it's taking me to drive an RV to Talladega. So I'm just going to sit at home where I've got my own beer, my own bathroom, and sit on the couch. And thus the attendance numbers started to dwindle. And then that became across the board with all of them, where then the races looked less exciting because you had fewer people there. And it was all an imperfect storm. Am I way overthinking that?
No, I think that's a valid theory. And definitely, I mean, you've covered races at places like Kentucky Speedway, where you can park your motorhome overlooking the racetrack. And that's one thing that fans can't experience at Indianapolis. It's an extremely unique venue. I mean, it's just the way that it's built. I mean, conceivably, you could put some RVs on the back straight on the golf course, but I don't think that the Brickyard Crossing folks would look too kindly on that. But yeah, the decline of NASCAR, it can't be pinpointed to one thing. You can't say, oh, it was the car tomorrow, or you can't say it was, the Goodyear problems. NASCAR's growth, in the 90s and the 2000s was almost unexplainable because, up until the late 90s, IndyCar racing was doing pretty well, and a lot of people considered it the king in America. But somehow, even while IndyCar racing was doing well in the 90s, NASCAR still managed to overtake it. And I think it was just, I think there came a point where maybe there was some oversaturation. Do these guys really need to run 40 weekends a year?
Well, and not only that, Oreo, but somebody pointed out to me, Oreo, also, in addition to that, to your point, Chicagoland, Kentucky, people that lived within 4 or 5 hours of Indianapolis now all of a sudden had a number of different tracks to choose from.
They did. And God bless the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It's unique. It's wonderful. But compared to other oval tracks, it's a challenging track for a viewer. I mean, even in the absolute best seats, the catbird seats up the top of turn 1 and turn 4, you still struggle to see the whole circuit. Whereas, especially if you're used to going to a short track, whether it's Phoenix or Richmond or something like that, the fact, one of the appeals of oval racing is the fact that you can sit in a seat and see the whole track. And that's one thing that Indianapolis has never been able to cater to. But at the same time, there's nothing else like it. There's nothing like sitting in turn 1 and seeing the cars at a distance come out of 4 and come straight at you for that 5/8 of a mile long straight. It's a totally unique viewing experience, but for people who are accustomed to the standard oval experience where you sit up high and you have a panoramic view, it can be kind of a letdown in that regard.
John, how different for folks that'll be out for the 30th anniversary of the Brickyard on Sunday here at IMS, how different will the cars be compared to the last time NASCAR raced the oval?
Well, in 1994, the cars were still, NASCAR was essentially still running 60s and 70s technology then. NASCAR, it's the joke about NASCAR is it took them until 2015 or something like that to discover fuel injection, which Formula One and IndyCar racing had been using since the 1950s. NASCAR, until they brought out this current generation of car, was using a rear axle based on an old Ford design that dates to the 40s or the 50s, if I recall. The current car, the next-gen car, as they call it, that's been in use for 3 years now, it's a much more modern race car. It's not a modern racing car in the sense like when the IMSA sports car race comes here in September, the cars that run in the GT classes there are the current state-of-the-art technical modern. These current NASCAR cars are probably early 2000s technology in terms of sports car. But the biggest change is that in the past, the teams would literally build their own cars from scratch. They would have tube benders, they would have sheet metal fabricators, whereas now you have to go out and you have to buy your chassis from Dallara designed it, but You have to buy it from a certain company, the only approved manufacturer. You have to buy a certain gearbox. You have to buy the same suspension parts. It's become spec car racing, essentially, where every car is the same. The aerodynamically equal. The cars, they're very clever the way they use graphics to add grills and headlights and taillights and such to them. But the cars are 96% the same, with only minor details between Ford, Chevy, and Toyota. And of course, each manufacturer does their own engine. So it's a different philosophy. The cars, technology-wise, it's been 30 years, but technology-wise, these cars are probably 40 years newer.
Oreo, can the return to the oval, and I admit, for myself, and I enjoyed the road course, I'll be honest with you. I thought in particular, the Xfinity cars were really good on the road course here. But I understand why people got nostalgic for the oval, for the Brickyard 400. And even myself, it's only been 3 years, but, I'm kind of intrigued by it and a little bit invigorated by the fact that now all of a sudden it is a return back to the basics with the cars on the oval here. Can it recapture people this year?
Well, it's certainly not going to be 1994 or 1996 again. I think that for most people, the notion of a race at Indianapolis is far more appealing on the oval just because of the history and the tradition and everything. The other thing I think they could have going for them is that there's a possibility they might actually have a good race. This next-gen car, it's been kind of hit and miss at different tracks. The old car performed really well on intermediate tracks, but it wasn't so good on short ovals, whereas the new car, it's kind of done the opposite. And Indianapolis was always kind of its own unique duck. Probably the closest thing to it on the NASCAR schedule is Pocono, which, a third of Pocono is modeled after Indianapolis. And I got to admit, I didn't watch the Pocono race from start to finish, so I can't tell you, how to use it as a yardstick. But I think that the biggest thing that could help the Brickyard 400, I think, at this point, is just for it to be a compelling and entertaining car race again, to make people want to go for what they're supposed to go to a car race for, entertaining car racing. And that's something that the Brickyard, on the oval, it didn't offer very much. There was a very good race in 1996 between Dale Jarrett and Ernie Irvan. There was another very good race, I don't know, maybe 6-7 years after that. But for the most part, those races were snoozers. And I think if they can get out there and say, hey, we've got this new, fresh, modern car, and look what a difference it made to the racing, I think that they could get a bump out of that. It's certainly not going to get anywhere back to the point where it looks anywhere close to sold out. But if they can get 75 or 80,000 people out there on Sunday as opposed to the 40 or 50 they've been getting in recent years, I think it has to be a major victory. Even in its diminished state, the Brickyard 400 is still an extremely important event for the Speedway in the city of Indianapolis. You got tons of people here doing hotel rooms, restaurants, and the likes. And it's, it'd be great to see it get back to its glory days. But from an IMS perspective, it doesn't need the Brickyard to be a mega event as badly as it did in the 90s when it was using it to fund the Indy Racing League. The Speedway, the one great thing they've done in the last 20 years is they truly have made it a year-round facility. I live out by the track, and there's constantly cars on the track, whether it's BMW or Ferrari or Lexus. All kinds of manufacturers are using the track. And so it's the Speedway isn't as reliant upon the Brickyard as it was at one time, but it would be great just to have it kind of get a bump back to where it belongs as a crown jewel in the NASCAR schedule.
Oreo, lastly, let me ask you, how can somebody be so articulate and intelligent when it comes to talking about cars and auto racing, but at the same time be a fan of somebody like Pink Floyd? How does that happen? I mean, you're willing to travel around the globe to see Pink Floyd, but yet you have the intellect to be able to talk about, how does your musical taste suck so bad?
Well, I don't know. I thought you were going to attack me for being an REO Speedwagon fan or an Oasis fan.
Hey, listen, wait a minute. So you like Oasis, right?
I do.
Okay, well then we're cool then. Pink Floyd I don't get, but Oasis, I was asleep on Oasis during the 90s, and I got on board late, and I'm telling you right now, so here's our common ground, Oreo, even though we have a lot of common ground because we're buddies. But if Oasis is ever to actually reunite, I saw Noel Gallagher last year at Ruoff. There could not have been 1,000 people there. I don't think many people realize that it was one of the lead guys of Oasis. If they ever actually reunite, I don't care where it is. I don't care if it's in Manchester, England, or where it is. I'm going to it. Are you in? If they reunite,
that would definitely be an event, and that would be if you talk about Pink Floyd, David Gilmour and Roger Waters have performed once as Pink Floyd since 1981. They did a 22-minute set at Live 8 in 2005. And in answer to your question about Pink Floyd, I advise you to do this. Just tune out Roger Waters and listen to David Gilmour, and it'll all become clear to you.
All right. Fair enough. What's your favorite Oasis song?
I'm a big fan of Champagne Supernova, but oddly enough, I kind of like a couple of Liam's songs. Love Like a Bomb, that's a good one.
I mean, they've got a ton, man. They've got some that they're one of those bands to me. I mean, I love so many of their songs, but then I'm trying to think of the title of them, and oftentimes the title doesn't jive with the actual song.
Wonderwall is the one that I think everybody draws to, right? I mean, that's the.
Come on now, come on.
Right?
It is though. That's their signature hit. But Champagne
Wonderwall
Supernova
is instantly recognizable, and the thing that I would say about Oasis, and Noel doesn't get the respect he deserves. Noel sings Don't Look Back in Anger, and a lot of people may not recognize that as an Oasis song because it's not Liam singing.
Listen, if you go see – have you seen Noel Gallagher in concert, Oreo?
Yes, I have multiple times.
Because he plays he plays obviously the ones that are him, right? And it's great. I mean, you all – for a second there, you feel like you're there. All right, John Oriovitz, again, Brickyard, you can hear right now there are Xfinity cars out on track. Cup cars coming up in about 20 minutes or so. And by the way, Kevin Bowen going to join us at the top of the hour. John, appreciate the time as always, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, and for anybody that's out there Sunday, if the crowd is big, just park at my house at 15th and Lyndhurst.
You charging?
Yeah, no, you can. Orvitz probably provide you with a ham sandwich. He's got his own little hospitality group. Appreciate it, Oreo.
Thanks, fellas. Take care.
I appreciate it. By the way, speaking of Oreos, impressive here. Kurt Darling had mentioned he was looking for him. They brought by snacks. He is already housed off. What did you have here, Oreo? Excuse me, Kurt. You didn't have Oreos, but you had, in the last 2.5 minutes, you've already gone through a bag of Cheez-Its and an ice cream bar, right?
Yeah, so our lovely hospitality person here, Colleen, she brought us by a bunch of ice cream. I had one of those crunch bars the frozen crunch bars on a stick. And then I followed up with a bag of Cheez-Its.
Do you notice, though, that Colleen knew exactly where to place the chips? Like, she didn't think twice about where to put that bowl of chips. She found Kurt. She placed it right.
I mean, I'm not kidding you. This is one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. 3 boxes of McAllister's lunches and then that. And are you still hungry?
I could eat more, yeah. Can I make this a job in the company?
Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
You're the official Joey Chestnut of the company. I mean, it's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Hey, listen. Kurt, I mean, I wish I was your age because I would do the same thing because, I mean, you don't gain weight, so I'll give you credit, right? You got a fast metabolism, apparently. Kevin Bowen going to join us, by the way, top of the hour. We're at IMS. It's Query & Company. This is undoubtedly their signature song, but I think for diehards of Oasis, it's the one that you're like, okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you've heard it enough.
By the way, Kurt Darling has found Chips Ahoy now. This honestly is, listen, William Byron could come out here and go flag to flag, lead all 160 laps, set a track record for the fastest Brickyard 400 in history, turn a lap. He can eclipse, name any driver in the race, they could eclipse Arie Luyendyk's fastest qualifying lap record in an Indy car or Eddie Cheever's fastest Indy 500 lap of all time. And I don't know that anything that I'm going to see is going to be a more impressive display of prowess than what Kurt Darling's put on here today. Since we arrived at noon, he's had 3 McAllister box lunches. That includes the cookies. Then, after that, he polished it off with, when they brought over an ice cream bar, he ate that. And then that left a little bit of a strange viscosity within his saliva, so he had to mix in the clump of the Cheez-Its in his teeth. And then that, he thought, you know what, I've got to get something to scrape that off. So then he dug, literally, they have a bowl of goods here, and he went into that bad boy like Mikey trying to find the gold in the Goonies and went to the bottom of it and found the Chips Ahoy and just polished those off. Now, Kurt, since you finished the Chips Ahoy, I'm curious here. Are we done, or does the quest continue?
Need some milk.
Oh, the
right?
quest is always continuing, Jake.
You did
never
it again,
ends.
Jimmy.
Good Lord, man.
I haven't found my gold yet.
Do you eat at home?
I do eat at home, yes. In
You know
fact,
what, though?
I make excellent stir fry.
Not a stain on the shirt though. Like they're just clean, polished, like pristine. I tip the cap. As
I don't need a bib when I go to Red Lobster.
I mean, it's impressive, man. Absolutely impressive. Sounds like they just finished up with practice. I think the Cup car is getting ready to go out here. As a matter of fact, that practice begins, if I'm not mistaken, at 2:05 today. But Kevin Bowen's going to join us on the other side here on a Friday, and a gorgeous one. If you are in the area of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, why not come out? Because it's a great day to be out here. Every day is. It's always good to be out here. But little breeze, sun is out. Good day in the summertime in Indianapolis. Kevin Bowen's next.
Final hour of Query and Company here from Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the lead up to the 30th anniversary edition of the Brickyard at IMS. With Jake Query, I'm Jimmy Cook. Eddie Garrison back manning all the tunes and controls behind the ones and twos.
That's Drake London to you.
DriveHubler.com studio. Drake London, of course, with chai tea armed and ready to go.
You know what I just noticed, Jimmy?
What's that?
I find this fascinating.
Okay.
During the break, and Kevin Bowen going to join us here, mostly to avoid watching the human disposal next to me of Kurt Darling working on cookies.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking down.
Okay.
And what I noticed, see if you find anything fascinating about our respective foot attire. And I know that sounds odd to say, but see if you find anything fascinating.
We both have black tennis shoes with black socks going.
No, see, maybe I'm just more of an attention for detail guy. Do you notice anything, Kurt? If you look at my shoes and Jimmy's shoes, do you notice anything fascinating?
I'd have.
Sorry to take you from the snacks.
No, you're fine. Yeah,
You're going to have to really use theater of the mind here, as this is an audio medium,
Okay.
to explain the
Here's the
difference.
bottom line that I find interesting. You are wearing Puma socks and Nike shoes, and I'm wearing Nike socks and Puma shoes.
Yes, you are correct.
Now, Kurt, on the other hand, is wearing Adidas shoes and socks. So Kurt Darling, at least this morning, got up and
I'm on
made sure
brand.
that he's matching on that, right?
Can I justify?
Is this some sort of a subliminal show chemistry that we have here?
It's solidarity, number one.
That's what I mean.
But number two in it would be that the Costco sock deals on those Puma socks are too good to pass up. That's why we're
I can't argue that. I can't argue that. But again, I just found it interesting.
It is.
It's almost like right now we should trade socks.
Trade socks.
Which is not the most disgusting thing you've ever heard, right?
No, it's not.
Joining us now, by the way, on the Express Pro Tire and Auto Guest Line, and I'm sure thrilled to be doing so, Kevin Bowen joins us, who's about to get really busy. I'm trying to stand up, and then
You got to go stand in the back of the shot.
Back up here. There we go. For the YouTube, I try to stand up, and then when I do, the YouTube chat, all you see is my midriff section, which, again, probably increases viewership. Kevin joining us now. Kevin, I was telling Jimmy, it is odd to think this is the last week that we're going to be doing a show without Colts football involved. So I know that your life is getting ready to turn upside down and become a little bit hectic. But nonetheless, plenty of storylines. We were talking earlier about the tight end position for one of them. Do you think that the Colts, when they look at the tight end situation, are looking here more going into the camp at a guy that can be the best stretch receiving type tight end for them, or are they looking more at a protective tight end that can, at least in the initial part of the season, help keep Anthony Richardson clean and get him in rhythm? Is everything going okay at home? Are we stacking dishes? What's going on here? Is everything going okay?
Have you fallen and you can't get up, Kev?
Yeah, what's happening?
All that foot talk had me trying to dial Rex Ryan in for a little, if we could get him on the line there.
That's right.
Smooth transition to the tight ends. I think they're just looking for consistency. I mean, when's the last time that position has offered a player of a consistent nature week in, week out? I don't, stretch the field, 3rd and 5 kind of go-to. Again, I think they'd just be happy with someone that is as reliable on September 15th as they are on November 15th. And really, I don't think you've had that since Jack Doyle retired. So it's clearly a room they feel better about than most. I think that's definitely clear. And it's a tough group, I think, I've said to many people, I wouldn't invest a major fantasy football pick in a Colts tight end. Sure, there might be one that emerges a little bit, but I just can't say that confidently for anybody. Certainly Jelani Woods probably falls in the category as the most intrigued. When you run it back, you obviously are hoping that there are certain players that didn't impact a whole lot last year that do. For the Pacers, they returned to a guy like Benedict Mathurin from the playoffs. And, for the Colts, obviously Richardson is atop that list. But Jelani Woods would also, be on that list after he did flash a little bit late in his rookie season. So, yeah, frankly, I just think a little bit of consistency is what they want from that position.
Kevin, I know that this is a drum that I continue to beat off-season after off-season, but I told you this both, off the air and on the air, that I think the missing ingredient, or one of the missing ingredients in a Shane Steichen-led offense, if Anthony Richardson's healthy, that's step one. But step two is then making sure you have solid foundation at all of your core weapons positions. And I know that tight ends maybe aren't valued as much as they were 10 years ago or so. But even if you were to have an average every down or close to every down tight end, I think that unlocks a level of offensive scheme for Shane Steichen that we have yet to see in a season's worth of football. The only way to be able to see it is going back to his OC days. You look at guys like Dallas Goedert that he had at his controls as the offensive coordinator in Philadelphia. I want to see that. I don't need George Kittle. I don't need Travis Kelce. I want a tight end that's out there for the majority of the snaps, developing that connection as either a safety valve or a key target in a Shane Steichen-led offense. In that tight end room, is that exist, or is it going to be another rotational by committee type of approach? You kind of gave the answer away saying, don't draft a Colts tight end. I'm right there with you. Why would you when you have no idea who's going to get the lion's share? Is that happening this year, or is it largely, again, by committee?
Yeah, I think it's largely by committee. I mean, I did the 53-man roster cut down last month, right after the minicamp ended, and I actually kept 5 tight ends, which I know is a ridiculous number to keep because, who needs 5 tight ends on a game day? But I just don't know who you're cutting out of that group. And, to me, it's a little bit just flip a coin week in and week out. And, yeah, again, in an ideal world, you would find somebody that offers a little bit more of that consistent nature. But I don't know if the opportunity will necessarily be there to even kind of earn that. I just think it's going to be such a, 3 different guys playing, a splitting of the reps kind of one week, and then, we'll see if it's the same 3 guys. And obviously you're going to have some injuries occur and things like that. We saw it last year with, Will Mallory. Obviously Jelani Woods was not playing. Will Mallory was out for a little bit. Drew Ogletree was out for a little bit. So I don't see it emerging as certainly not to start the year. I don't know. Maybe in the second half of the season someone will emerge. And again, Woods would probably be the guy that, people are most intrigued by and most want to see. But I remember Eddie and I discussed this earlier this week on my podcast. Even if you look at Woods, he had that big game against Pittsburgh in that 2022 season, which I know was a season to forget. But late in the year, he had that big game. I believe that's the only game in his NFL career with more than 3 catches. So, even if you are trying to look, there's almost a misconception, I think, at times about Jelani Woods. There's multiple of these games he produced as a rookie. When in reality, he really only had one. I know he had a multi-touchdown game as well, but he really only had one of, north of 4 catches, something like that. So I expect it to be a by-committee approach at tight end.
Actually, Kevin, my last question on the tight ends would be this, and I don't know if we've approached it this way. Of the tight ends in the Colts tight end room, which one has the skill set that is the most unique from the others?
I mean, it's probably Woods. That's probably where I would go. I do think Kylan Granson is very different than the other tight ends as well, and I think he's a bit of a forgotten guy at times. It's a contract year for him. But I think, for the most part, Mallory, Ogletree, even Allie Cox a little bit, just size-wise, they're all pretty similar. Now, Mallory, I think, is a guy that we probably shouldn't forget about either. He had I thought a moment or two as a rookie and was really injured last season leading up to training camp. He kind of was the Juju Brents of the offense almost with how banged up he was in his first offseason. So, I would say Granson, he's probably just more of your, wide out. I think he was a wide out, if I'm not mistaken, at one point in college, then transitioned to tight end there. So, I would say Kylan Granson probably, and then Jelani Woods just has the potential.
It may be too early to say that Kwity Paye now has competition at the pass rush position, but we talked about this earlier in the week, Kevin. I want your thought on it. Could competition at that situation for Kwity Paye actually allow him to flourish? I don't mean because it brings out the most of them, but because it kind of takes spotlight off of him perhaps now, and now we'll see the real and most consistent Kwity Paye step forward.
Yeah, Kwity got benched late last year out of that pass rush package. So even if they didn't have Latu last year, they opted to go for different guys than Kwity late in the season. It was, Tyquan Lewis was probably the main guy that they threw out there with DeForest Buckner, with Samson Ebukam, with Dayo Dangbo. So, theoretically, if you're drafting a guy 15th overall, you obviously think he's going to factor into the pass rush big time. So, I think Kwitty's got to earn that spot on the pass rushing downs. He's still going to play a ton on first and second down. Hell, he'll probably start because he is a very good run defender. So I think he's got a lot to prove, though. I know they picked up his contract for that 5th year, but still, if Dayo Degbo earns a big extension this season, financially, given the fact that you drafted a lot through 50th overall, just things are naturally going to get tighter. And, I don't think it's a slam dunk that Kwity Paye, earns a second contract here. Now, they obviously like him. They picked up his 5th-year option for 2025 and all of that. But, pass rushers at times, they can take multiple years to kind of grow into it. And, again, I think you really got to remove, looking just at Paye sack numbers. I mean, if you look at his pressures, his hurries, his knockdowns, I think those are a little bit more consistent numbers and stats. He ranked, near the bottom of the NFL for guys that play as much as he does. And again, they took him off the field in a lot of those critical situations late last season, which told you everything you needed to know about at the time how they viewed him. So, right now, I've heard Mike Chappell use this comparison before. Kwity Paye's Jabal Sheard, and that's a nice player, but it's not first-round pick material. So I'll be very interested to see not only just in general how that D-line room, the playing time spits out, how good that group is. I mean, Ballard is very publicly high on them. Really feels like they're one of the best units in the entire NFL. And I think if you want to be a legit January team, if that D-line group can live up to it, I think you will be, playing in the playoffs.
Kevin Bowen is our guest. You hear him weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. on these very airwaves in the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy. And, of course, you find all of his work, and that's especially needed to be locked onto on 1075thefan.com as we are less than a week away from Colts camp. Kevin, I keep going back to this secondary and the calls by many of us in this market for them to add a veteran or for them to add some more experienced bodies there for when you get past Juju Brents and Kenny Moore. You have unproven commodities all across the board, and that's probably being kind about it. I would say you could even go as far as to say you have players that are underachieving, late-round selections that are undetermined what their future in the NFL is. But Chris Ballard is high on that secondary. He believes that it was a growing pain type year last year that will lead to fruits of the labor being bared this season. Let's play out that it's a pedestrian year for guys in the trenches or quarterbacks on the schedule for the Colts wind up extending plays with their legs or moving out of the pocket to the point it nullifies the pass rush. Is it right to be concerned for the secondary outside of Juju and Kenny Moore, or am I being too pessimistic and there actually is some reason for optimism in the back half of this Colts defense?
Honestly, Jimmy, I appreciate the kind words about the website. Yes, 1075 The Fan.
Of course.
Colts content coming your way here starting, right now, but especially starting next week. I think corner is different than safety. Now, I think both of them could use an infusion of some sort of veteran experience. Again, I'm going to go with one of my colleagues here, Joel A. Erickson, has used the phrase, just raise the floor in that secondary. Like, I get that the ceiling is going to be, young guys, but raising the floor, I think, it's like the Pacers defense. The Pacers could just get to this, average defensively, you're going to make a run, and that's kind of how I feel in the secondary a little bit. But, corner, I think I can listen and understand where Chris Ballard's coming from. Okay, I get that Jalen Jones, had some moments as a rookie that you really, really like. I get that Dallas Flowers, pre-Achilles, had a nice start to last season. Juju Brents, albeit tons of injuries as a rookie, again, I think he had some moments. At safety, I can't say that about really anybody outside of Julian. And I think Julian Blackmon is a very good football player. But again, Blackmon has had injuries, and he's only re-signed for 1 year. So short-term, long-term, safety to me is a totally different animal. Like, if you need to pick one or the other that you address here coming up in the next week or so, to me it's safety much more than corner. Nick Cross has been benched multiple times in his career. He's had 4 starts in, 2 years, and Rodney Thomas, a 7th-round pick, has had over 20 starts in the same draft, and then he got benched. I mean, they literally took a dude in Ronnie Harrison Jr., who started at linebacker at one point in the month of December, and then 2 weeks later, they were so desperate at safety, they turned to him to go back and play safety. So, again, that tells me kind of everything you need to know about where you're at safety-wise. So I would say safety is much more head scratching than corner. I still don't sleep, easy at night, or I wouldn't sleep easy at night if I were the Colts based off of where they're at kind of corner wise. But again, I can listen to it. Safety, I can't listen to it.
Kevin Bowen is our guest talking about the Colts. He's on the Express Pro Tire and Auto guest line. Kevin, Shane Steichen in year 2, if you go back and look at camp last year, and maybe Shane Steichen looking back at the way he ran camp, I know you had the Taylor situation. That was a distraction. But just overall, we talk so much about the roster. What do we expect differently from Steichen, if anything? What areas do you think he might try to tweak in terms of his coaching approach or scheme, either one, in year 2?
Well, I think scheme will look a lot different, Jake, just with Richardson. You obviously didn't even tap into kind of that part of the playbook. And, one thing I really respect about Shane is he is uber innovative. I mean, I think he's not afraid to use plays from college teams, high school teams. I mean, there were plays the Colts used last year they found from high school teams that they literally watched film and they were like, wow, that looks really, really cool. How can we incorporate that into kind of what we run? So, that part about Steichen, I think, is really important in a league that, as soon as you feel like you've got it, you got to keep on kind of pushing the limits when it comes to that. So I think that'll be a lot different. I am curious. We saw, I think, a lot of accountability, at times kind of quiet accountability, but, guys getting benched, guys getting cut, et cetera, et cetera. We saw that, I think, throughout year 1. I'm interested in the first month of the season, just in kind of pinpointing the start to the year. I mean, we don't need to remind anybody out there, but, it's now, 2013 since you've last won a season opener, which is just such an astonishingly kind of pathetic stat, really, that it's been that long since you've won in week 1. And lo and behold, I'd say the biggest game of the season is in week 1, the fact that it's Houston in your own building. So, a question I asked Shane at the end of minicamp, he's obviously been here for 1 year of that, but the stat, a lot of the players have been the same. What are you doing differently, or what? And all he'll offer is, yes, I'm aware, we'll do some things differently. But again, what does that look like? Does it mean more playing time in the preseason? Does it mean more physicality in training camp? Does it mean less of that? Does it mean less? Does Richardson need to play in the preseason? Do you want his first hit to be Will Anderson Jr. week 1? It's to me, all of that I think is super, super fascinating because, again, it's such an important game right out of the gate. So I just think that aspect to it will be really interesting to watch.
Kevin Bowen is our guest, and you can follow him on Twitter at KBowen1070, and you hear him on the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. on these very airwaves. Kevin, moving beyond what Anthony Richardson is going to be to half of the equation I bring up now, for Jonathan Taylor, is this finally the year, with all the contract concerns and talks aside and him hopefully being 100% healthy, is this finally the year where you're able to utilize him in a 20 to 25 carries type of workload? That might even be on the high end, but where you're using him more efficiently at this stage because you hopefully have established weaponry with Anthony Richardson in this receiving core now?
Yeah, I really think there's a chance, and I know Richardson's presence might dial this back. I think there's a chance that Taylor has the most carries of any running back in the league compared to the rest of his guys on the roster. I don't view Zach Moss as Trey Sermon as he's going to get 12 carries a game or 10 carries a game to kind of offset Taylor. I mean, you're paying Taylor a strong amount of money. He got 30 carries in that season finale against Houston, and that was an absolutely incredible performance by Taylor. He was in the locker room at one point in that game, and almost single-handedly, if he wasn't maybe on the bench on 4th and 1, it could have been different. Almost single-handedly, took the Colts to the playoffs. So I do think 30 carries I get week in and week out is probably not sustainable, but I still think you'll see a really healthy carry load for him when you compare him to the rest of the running backs in the league. And I don't know when the last time I have felt the Colts offense had an aspect to that unit that struck as much fear into an opponent as I think the duo of Richardson and Taylor will this season. I think the Colts offense has been just very blah and very vanilla, and they might be able to put up points, but there's not that one single aspect to it. in recent years that, again, you really are freaking out an opposing defensive coordinator as they get ready to prepare for you that week. And I think having Richardson and Taylor back there and all the multiplicity you can have off that run game and everything that, play action stuff and zone read and, read option and all of that, I truly think is going to be such a great weapon for this offense. And again, I just don't think whether it was, Matt Ryan or Carson Wentz or Gardner Minshew, even with Taylor in the backfield, you can always kind of load up the box. And for the most part, you can limit a guy. But now when you throw Richardson and his arm in there as well, I just think that's an element that the Colts have been lacking for a long, long time. So I'll be very curious to see, how potent that is, because I think it has the ability to be pretty potent.
Kevin, one of the things to me a year ago that we forget about, and it was out of necessity, I totally get it, but you could say that the Colts had a 2 running back punch, if you will. I know that wasn't oftentimes when they're lined up aside one another in the backfield, but they did have kind of a good yin and yang going there. Is this now, assuming he stays healthy, is Jonathan Taylor the bell cow back that's going to get 90% of the carries?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would think so, especially with Zach Moss no longer here. And
that's what I mean. So they don't try to groom or see what they have in Sermon and trying to utilize him in spell situations, right? Because there's no reason to go away from Taylor in any way, right?
Right. I mean, there's an element of and it's kind of funny. I don't know if you guys have watched Hard Knocks at all with the Giants, but I thought there was an interesting clip with some former Colt, I guess, friends and enemies in that clip. It was the Giants GM talking with Frank Gore and Malky Kawa. Now, Malky Kawa, of course, Jonathan Taylor's agent, and they were discussing, what do the numbers tell you about running backs and their sustainability throughout a career? And the Giants GM basically was like, at the age of 27, you can see a steady decline, sometimes probably more than steady. And Taylor's not at that age yet, but if you look at Taylor at Wisconsin, I mean, they ran him into the ground. He had
you're right.
Huge amount of carries at Wisconsin. And, I think you see this debate a lot of times in the draft when guys come out. There are a lot of NFL teams that would rather see a by committee approach. So the tread on the tires is much more for some of these guys than it was for Taylor. Now, devil's advocate would say Taylor's just different. He's, been uber cognizant of his body very early on in Wisconsin. And so, maybe he can be a bit of an outlier. So I guess to answer the question, Jake, it'd be more of if the Colts believe that age is real and that his carry number is something to monitor, then maybe you do see, 15 to 17 a game. And then late in the season, i.e. Houston last year, when you really, really need them, boom, here's 30 carries when you have to have it. So that part about me, I'm a little curious to see how it plays out. But if you were going to make me, pick a number, yes, I think he will have a very high percentage of carries because he's healthy this offseason, and also you're paying him that much money to do that.
Does him getting the high percentage of carries, Kevin, then nullify the idea that they could maybe scoop up a veteran running back that gets cut, as we know always happens when you trim down to a 53-man roster?
Yeah, it's funny you missed that, Jimmy. If you guys remember back in March, remember there was that brief period, the Colts have interest in A.J. Dillon from the Packers. And then, that was it in terms of running backs, throughout the offseason. Whereas this time last year, and obviously the Taylor situation was playing into this, but, it was every other day of, this guy's working out for the Colts, this guy's working out for the Colts. So that aspect I do think, I think has quieted down, and I think has died down a little bit. So I'll be – to answer it, I don't think so.
Because the reason I ask it is because it's pretty clear from your analysis of it, from what me and Jacob talked about, Evan Hull and Trey Sermon are not the heir apparent to a Zach Moss type role. So are you content with just making Taylor another bell cow once again, like he was early on in his career, or are you leaving the door open for a potential veteran that is better than Sermon or Hull? The obvious way that happens is one of them get hurt. I would never wish that upon anybody, but I guess moving injuries aside, if there's no injuries, you don't envision them trying to upgrade that position group when roster cutdowns happen.
I do not.
Okay.
I'm probably more in the camp of don't have your sons be running backs. Like, that's kind of my thought process, to be honest with you. I'm a little bit more of, you can kind of go to the grocery and find that. I get that, there's plenty of evidence to where people would disagree with me on that. But, I remember saying this with Jake, and Jake and I had the show. I'm of the belief of, you don't draft the running back till day 3. That's just kind of how I look at it with the draft of, I think there should be positional value in ranking it. Certainly, there are guys that Jonathan Taylor's a great, great player. But you run into injuries and you run into wear and tear, and that's a position that the career shelf life is less than it is at other spots. So I don't see a huge need for it, Jimmy, but, at the same time, you just never know when roster cut down happens. But to me, there's been too many instances of, the Jonathan Williams of the world, if that name rings a bell, had a couple 100-yard games, and Marlon Mack got hurt a few years ago. And how many running backs did the Cleveland Browns have last year, and they still made the playoffs? So, that's kind of how I view it a little bit more.
Kevin, did you have fun yesterday at the fan golf outing at the back nine?
I had a blast. You were the mayor. I'll give you a lot of credit. You were every time I turned around, I felt like Jake Query was on the mic, and you were kissing babies and manning a radio show, and you were doing it all.
Well, you know what? Franciscan's been pretty good to me, so we had to do. As a matter of fact, our Feel Good for the Heart Friday is coming up here in just a couple seconds, but just a couple minutes, I should say. So Franciscan's been good to me. They were good for that, and it was helping out the Franciscan Health Foundation. It was good to see everybody yesterday.
It was awesome. I've said this to you many times. I love getting out and about and interacting with listeners, and meeting people and all that. And, boy, the auction items were terrific. I felt like that was kind of the best year we've had from it looked like Newgard and McLaughlin had some signed gear, Brad Stevens signed ball, Colts stuff as well. So thank you to all those people that donated items.
He is Kevin Bowen. Again, you hear him weekdays 7 to 10 a.m. on the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy. You can follow him on Twitter at KBowen1070. And, of course, find his work all on 1075thefan.com. That is a must with Colts camp inside of a week away. Kevin, enjoy the rest of the weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
Boys, enjoy IMS. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Kevin Bowen joining us on the guest line. All right, when we come back, it is a Good for the Heart Friday. And I had mentioned the fact that now, this being the week where you have that weird circumstance, it happens like once a year on either side of the Major League Baseball All-Star game with no major professional sports being played. I realize that NASCAR is now back out on the oval, but summertime's about food and refreshments, right? And we've got somebody that's actually doing some good and doing it against the odds. And it made me feel good when I read the story, and so I thought I'd share it with you, and we'll do it next here on The Fan. And we are at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway where cars are about to fire up here for practice for the Brickyard 400. As a matter of fact, I think Kyle Larson might be out on the track right now. You're going to hear him go past. Kurt Darling just dipped into the Tootsie Rolls now, which is impressive. Speaking of food, by the way, summertime, you think about barbecues and you think about having fun and you think about everything that goes into, and I always tell people, make sure, especially in an era now where you don't carry a lot of cash, put a couple extra dollars in the glove compartment of your car to make sure that you're able to support all the kids that are having lemonade stands, for example. And yesterday I found out when we were at the golf outing for the Franciscan Health Foundation to benefit that, the Franciscan Health now has a food pantry that has distributed 1,000 pounds of fresh produce weekly by Gleaner's Food Bank to folks in Johnson County and southern Marion County. A food pantry serving over 110 households a week that now has over 18,000 clients and 5,700 households, making sure that everybody has food that is available to them. And it is all food that is designed to make sure that it is not high in calorie content and is nutritious and healthy. Just one of the great things that Franciscan does for folks. That, along with the fact that it's the #1 heart program in Indiana for cardiology by health grades, #1 in Indiana for interventional coronary care, and for major cardiac surgery by care checks. Keep in mind, folks, that very affordable $49 heart scan, which can be a difference maker for you. Jason sent me a message on Twitter to say that his dad went in for a $49 routine heart scan, found out he had 80% blockage in his widowmaker artery, and they went ahead and got not one but two stents in him right then, and he's feeling great. That's what we're trying to do to raise heart awareness and health promotion through Franciscan. I appreciate them each and every week doing our Feel Good, Good for the Heart segment. And it does involve food and drink this week, because I was sitting there looking the other day, and I noticed Garrett's 9th annual famous lemonade stand. This is going to be taking place in Anderson a week from tomorrow from 10 until 4. And you may wonder who Garrett is. Garrett Imel, who's a 13-year-old that lives just north of us. But his mom, Heather Imel, joins us on the program now to talk about Garrett's story, which I find, Heather, to be tremendously uplifting and I think makes people feel good, and they're good for the heart. So thank you for joining us on the show, Heather. Happy Friday to you. And let's begin with this. You are Garrett's proud mother. But life hasn't always necessarily been easy for Garrett, but he's made the most of it. Take me through before the lemonade stand came about, just Garrett's journey.
So thank you, Jake, for having me on the radio today and supporting Garrett. He is 13 and he has cerebral palsy and he has some low vision. He was born as a preemie at 2 pounds, 15 ounces. And about at a year old, we found out he was diagnosed with cerebral palsy. And during first steps and some therapy, we found out that he probably wasn't going to be able to walk, which put him in a wheelchair. And he doesn't see himself as in a wheelchair. Things are difficult for him, but through his amazing personality and his outlook, he gets through things as well as he can.
And with that, this is the 9th annual. Now, I'm doing the math, Heather, and I'm not necessarily a math whiz, but if he's 13 years old and this is the 9th annual, that means even as a youngster, he began this lemonade stand, which kind of became more than that. All of a sudden it becomes a bake sale and then a raffle, and it's turned into a fundraiser as well that I think the entire community rallies behind. Take me through what's going to happen a week from Saturday.
So it started out with us just making 1 gallon of lemonade at a rummage sale, and it has become a huge event here in our county. And we have local police departments, fire departments that show up. We have motorcycles, clubs, Jeep clubs, car clubs, family, friends, principals. It's almost as if anyone that he has touched their lives. Once you're with Garrett for a minute, you're locked in to love him forever because of his personality. And so with that being said, he chooses every year what charity or what he wants to do with the donations that we get. Last year, he raised $2,000 for Curing Kids Cancer through Meekum Car Auction. And this year, he wants to do half of it for Meekum Car Auction for Curing Kids Cancer and the other half for Turn Away No Longer, which is a foster organization here in Madison County.
Where does this come from, Heather, in terms of, I mean, it's obviously a huge credit to you, right, in the heart that Garrett has and just the ability for people to rally around him. But, you know, when was the moment when you realized or had the epiphany that what you had here was a pretty special guy that was not necessarily dwelling on his own challenges, but rather trying to help out the challenges of others?
I guess it's just when he has a heart of like an older person, and he truly cares and has a passion for everything that he does, and he always wants to make somebody happy, and he wants to know them for who they are.
And so this lemonade and bake sale is going to be taking place. This is a week from tomorrow, correct?
Yes, July 27th from 10 to 4.
Okay, and this is in Anderson. Now, this is just at your house in Anderson, is that right?
It is just at our house. This will probably be the last year, and next year we'll probably at a different location at a local fire station that has opened up because we're getting a little bit too big for our street.
See, I like that, Heather. You're starting to outgrow this a little bit, aren't you? Starting to take the show on the road.
We are. And we actually do take the show on the road because in August he will be doing for East Madison County Territory Fire Department. He does their community day and does a lemonade stand there for their function.
So now Garrett is in what grade, Heather?
He's in 8th grade.
Okay, so Garrett's an 8th grader, and again, this is the 9th annual famous lemonade stand, bake sale, and raffle that Garrett is putting on. Garrett IML up in Anderson. I will tweet out at Jake Query, Jakequeuery, as well as from our show account here, the flyer for it in lieu of giving out your address on the radio. I didn't know if you'd want to do that or not, Heather, but I will certainly post the information. But here's the other thing, and I'm going to alert Eddie and Jimmy to this as well. A little birdie told me, and I think it was a while ago, and I apologize on my delayed response here, but a little birdie told me that Garrett has an interest in sportscasting. Is this correct?
Yes, he does.
Who's his favorite team?
For baseball or what?
Any of them. Any of them. The team that you find him most passionately rooting for is which?
It is probably bull riding.
Really?
Professional
That's
bull
cool.
riding, yes.
Professional bull riding. I can appreciate that. Now, did he, for example, and I don't know, and I'm kind of going off on a stretch here, Heather, but I know my nephew, for example, when he was a youngster, took some physical therapy by riding along, like horse riding, that kind of thing. Did Garrett have any introduction to that kind of thing, or how did he get into bull riding?
He actually seen it on TV, but he used to do therapy at TheraPlay in Carmel.
Yep. Okay.
But whatever Garrett gets, like he has a passion for golf, for IndyCar, for just about anything sports related.
Well, I love Garrett's passion for passion, and I love the fact that he's doing the lemonade stand. I love the fact that he's got a heart of gold. I love the fact that you helped, create that within him, obviously. And because he wants to be a sportscaster, then I think what we need to have Garrett come in studio, hang out. I'll take him around the racetrack next summer when the cars are around here. But before that, we'll have him come in and do a little PBR, professional bull riding commentary for us. That sound good?
I think he would love that. Thank you so much, Jake.
I appreciate it. I will definitely be in touch with you, Heather, and I will get the information out to everybody. Thanks so much, and best of luck next Saturday, all right?
Thank you. Have a great day. Thank you so much.
All right, we appreciate it. Heather IML up in Anderson. Again, Garrett's 9th annual famous lemonade stand. This is all from a young man with cerebral palsy who said, you know what, I want to help out others. And the money's going to go for curing kids' cancer. And then we're going to get Garrett in studio, and we're going to hear from him firsthand how it goes after the fact. We'll come back. Thank you to Franciscan Health for our Feel Good, Good for the Heart Friday. And Jimmy will have his plays of the day as we wrap up the week here on Query & Company.
Today's plays of the day with an extended look into the weekend. But first, we start with baseball.
Did you have the over-under on when my tees would run?
I actually took
the over on that,
and it lost.
Hit.
So, but I can't wait.
No, that hit.
Oh, did it? Well, I can't wait to see. I cannot wait for Monday's show after getting psyched up for that. It's a big week next week with Colts camp, but we have baseball back in our grasp today. We'll take the New York Yankees to start after the All-Star break with a winning way. We'll take them on the money line over the Tampa Bay Rays. We'll also take a team that was good to us in the first half. Hopefully they'll be good to us in the second half. We'll take cute fella.
Hey, root for me.
The Baltimore Orioles to win the money line over the Texas Rangers. Also this weekend is the WNBA All-Star Game as they take on Team USA. This has all the makeup. If you're a fan of team pettiness, if you're a fan of team revenge, it is a delicious cocktail on display on Saturday night. I will take Caitlin Clark 15-plus points in this game. That's at minus 145. I will also take Caitlin Clark over 8 assists in this game. That is plus money. I think she clears that easily. It's a Caitlin Clark revenge game of the highest order against Team USA. I'll take Caitlin Clark for both those props. Eddie, any plays for you?
Negative, Ghost Rider.
No plays for Eddie Garrison, so those are your plays of the day. Yankees, Orioles, and then on Saturday, Caitlin Clark over 15 total points and over 8 total assists as the WNBA All-Star team takes on Team USA.
You know, I've been sitting here. I've had a couple of hours to think about this. I figured this out. The mystery has been solved.
Okay.
Now, I'm a regular.
Did it have to do with meddling kids?
Kind of.
Okay.
I'm a regular Perry Mason here, right?
Yeah.
And I realize I'm now referencing a television show from 60 years ago.
That's why I went Scooby-Doo. I felt like that was safer, but that's fine.
Scooby-Doo actually, surprisingly, also from...
Yes, correct. Also from...
Right?
In terms of the original run.
But also. A little more longevity, admittedly. Here's what I figured out. Eddie Garrison, now known as Drake London, who is the CEO of Querying Company and is back in studio. As we know, Eddie took a little trip out west to Seattle. Eddie came back from Seattle with
a changed man, one might say.
He was a changed man. He came back and was eating a lot of watermelon gummies. Now, he never said, and obviously you don't have to go to Washington anymore to get those kinds of things. I mean, you know, but nonetheless, Eddie was in a very smiley mood, very relaxed, laid-back dude when he brought back his watermelon gummies from Seattle. Never mentioned any sort of ingredients in the gummies, but he always just kind of had them laying around. Mm-hmm. Now, meanwhile, Kurt Darling is what we call a candy skulker. What I've noticed is that if there is candy to be found, Kurt Darling's going to find it. We have a bowl in front of us that has every kind of chip known to man, and somehow at the bottom there's a Tootsie Roll, and Darling found it. I think what's happened is somehow earlier today, probably because of the news of last night's Republican National Convention, the fact that into all of 465 is under construction, the world was shutting down, planes were falling out of the sky. Kurt came in early to do his duties as the news guy at WIBC. Commendable.
Yes.
He knew he was doing double duty and had to come to the Speedway, wanted a little pick-me-up, likes candy, skulked around, got into the Eddie stash, had some watermelon gummies, and now shows up here and has had not one, not two, but 3 McAllister Deli box lunches, one bag of Cheez-Its, a Nestle Crunch ice cream bar, 2 Tootsie Rolls, and now is working on Chips Ahoy. I think I cracked the code here, right?
So the only pushback I would have, Eddie, when did you take that Seattle trip?
April.
Okay, so there's no pushback because the last time we saw Kurt go on the food tear was during May.
Correct.
So that would have been after the Seattle trip.
I think Kurt, either that or Kurt just goes home and fasts, and his wife's like, honey, what would you like for dinner tonight? Nothing, because I'm going to the Speedway in 3.5 weeks, and they're going to bring me an entire 7-Eleven in front of me, and I'm going to plow through it by lap 180. It's impressive, Kurt. Did I crack the code?
Guilty as charged. Thanks, Eddie.
All right. Fair enough. Jimmy, you got what going on this weekend?
So the basketball tournament begins tonight. Hinkle Fieldhouse fortunate enough to be hosting one of those regions. Men of Mackey, the Purdue alumni team, already playing. It starts at 3 o'clock, but then tonight we'll all be at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Assembly Ball, the IU alumni team plays, and then All Good Dogs, the Butler alumni team, will play at Hinkle Fieldhouse. Looking forward to that. And then shout out to my nephew, Brody Burdick, his birthday party taking place this weekend. Should be a fun time. How about you? Any fun weekend plans other than the IndyCar?
Toronto,
Yep.
IndyCar Toronto, and then back at it on Monday to talk not only about what happened in the Brickyard, but we'll recap that, and then obviously turning the tables really towards the NFL because Colts season is going to be here before we know it, and that means this week the Colts will be reporting to camp. So look forward to that. Thanks to everybody for making it possible for us to be out here today at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Practice continues until 3:25 today. John is up next. JMV will be with you until 6 o'clock. So everybody have a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you on Monday on Query & Company. Thanks for listening.